Good evening. My name is Paula Reid, Mayor of Kingborough. It is my pleasure to welcome you all to tonight's meeting on Monday the 5th of December 2022. Welcome to those in the public gallery who have joined us this evening, and also a very warm welcome to those people who are watching along at home via YouTube. Being 5:30 p.m, I now officially declare the meeting open. I wish to advise that council meetings are recorded and made publicly available on our website. In accordance with the council's policy, I will now ask the General Manager to confirm that the audio recording has started.
Confirm, Mayor.
Thank you. I wish to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land, pay respects to elders past and present, and acknowledge today's Tasmanian Aboriginal community. Our attendees this evening are myself, Councillor Reid, Deputy Mayor Councillor Gladewright, Councillor Antoli, Councillor Bain, Councillor Cordova, Councillor Dean, Councillor Fox, Councillor Midgley and Councillor Richardson. From our staff this evening, we have the General Manager, Mr Arnold, Director of Engineering Services, Mr Reeve, Director of Governance, Recreation and Property Services, Mr Smee, Director of Environment, Development and Community Services, Dr Fox, the Media and Communications Advisor, Ms Adams, the Communications and Engagement Support Officer, Ms Klein, Executive Assistant, Mrs Morton, and Manager Environmental Services, Ms Quinn. We have apologies this evening from Councillor Street. Still on page 1, confirmation of minutes, that the minutes of the open session of Council meeting number 22 held on the 21st of November 2022 be confirmed as a true record. I'm looking for a mover and a seconder, please. I've got a mover in Councillor Fox and a seconder in Councillor Gladewright. All those in favour? Against? Motion is carried unanimously. Still on page 1, workshops held since the last council meeting on the 28th of November, last Monday. We had a workshop in relation to sports ground user fees. Turning to page 2, declarations of interest. Does any councillor have a declaration of interest? No, thank you. Transfer of agenda items. Is there any item on the agenda that a councillor would like to move from closed into open session or open into closed? Thank you. Questions without notice from the public. Does any member of the public who is with us this evening like to ask a question without notice? No? Oh, you do? Thank you very much. If you could just come to the lectern and turn on the microphone by pressing the talk button. Yep. And if you could just state your name and suburb first and then ask your question, please.
Okay, Charles Biggins, Leslie Vale. I have some questions regarding the biodiversity offset. Is that an agenda item I'm allowed to ask those questions?
No, you're allowed to ask that.
Cool. Every other state of Australia and the Commonwealth runs a biodiversity offset scheme through their government environment ministries, backed by acts of Parliament and with the authority to levy new taxes. My question is, what was the legal advice given to Kingborough Council in 2004 and more recently with the formation of the biodiversity offset scheme that led to the belief that an environmental offset and now a biodiversity offset scheme could legally be administered by a local council?
General Manager, please.
Through you, Mayor. Thank you for the question, Mr Biggins. My colleague, Ms Quinn, may wish to elaborate further on the response. But let me start by saying that under the Local Government Act, all councils, all 29 councils in Tasmania are entitled to charge fees or charges. That's the starting point.
Ms Quinn.
Through you, Mayor. Thank you for the question, Mr Biggins. In 2004, Council was part of a regional consultation in the southern region of Tasmania because there are a number of southern councils who wanted to look at biodiversity offsetting in local government. Through that regional group, which was run through the Southern Tasmanian Councils Authority, the councils went to the state government, which was Depikwi at the time, the department, and advocated for the department to take on biodiversity offsetting, and at that time they weren't interested in doing that. They were developing their own policy, but were very happy for council to develop theirs. We also worked with the Forest Practices Authority at the time, and they also had their own policy, but were encouraging of council to develop ours. So both of those organisations have had input into council's policy. They're aware of it. The department, most recently, in the most recent review of the policy, had input into the policy and provided feedback on it. And we haven't sought legal input into the policy, as council hasn't believed it's required.
Thank you. Mr. Biggins, do you have a further question?
Yes, yeah. As only the states and Commonwealth have the authority to levy new taxes, and they make no claims that the biodiversity offsets are not a tax, how does Kingborough Council's offset payments differ from a state or Commonwealth tax?
Ms. Quinn.
Through you, Mayor, council is the belief that our offset policy does not use taxes. So a biodiversity offset, as you'd be aware under the policy, is not a tax. It is a fee that is set by council, and that's how it is named in the policy. So it appears we have a difference of opinion about whether the offset, the financial offset, is a fee. I would also like to point out, though, that biodiversity offsetting under the policy, financial offsets are the absolute residual amount of a biodiversity offset, and the hierarchy in our policy sets out, as is common in most biodiversity offset policies, that biodiversity offsets are best when they're on site, because they're supposed to match value for value. So what is being cleared is supposed to be very similar in value. Like for like is another way of putting that. So I guess a focus on the fee part, on the financial offset, seems interesting to me, given that biodiversity offsetting in Kingborough is really about on-site offsets, or if not on-site, then off-site. And financial offsets are only used for that residual amount that is left over, and that is what our policy states must be the case, that they must be part of an offset package.
$1 million worth of residual. Yep. So in the formation of the new biodiversity offset policy, there's reference to consultation with experts in the field. Who are the experts that were consulted with the formation and content of the wording of the Kingborough biodiversity offset policy?
Ms. Quinn.
Through you, Mayor. Yeah, that is absolutely correct. It's not a new policy, though. It was a review of the existing policy that occurred. So biodiversity offsetting, as you know, has been undertaken in Kingborough for a very long time, quite successfully. So it's not new, but it was a review. The most recent review, council consulted with technical experts in the field, which were predominantly ecological specialists, consultants that work with the policy on a day-to-day basis pretty much with council, and also the state government and the Forest Practices Authority. I don't have the full list of who they were, but if we could take it on notice, we could potentially provide that to you.
Thank you. And my last question, has any consideration been given to including bushfire mitigation works as a necessary stewardship expense that would need to be accounted for when protecting biodiversity assets for perpetuity? Are landholders hosting biodiversity offsets made aware of their liabilities under the Fire Act to mitigate the risk of fire on their property and from spreading to their neighbours?
Ms. Quinn.
Through you, Mayor. It's a really good question. Conservation covenants. So one part of the biodiversity offset program in Kingborough is about private land conservation. So it's about looking for properties in Kingborough and landholders who are interested in entering into a conservation covenant under the Nature Conservation Act. It is the state government, therefore, who negotiates that conservation covenant and the plan that goes with it. So it would be within that conservation management plan, which again is a statutory document, which would say whether fire and clearing could be used on that parcel. Generally, conservation covenants, as you might know, are not places close to residential areas or don't generally have a dwelling in them. They're usually on a large property. They can be, of course. They can be close to residential areas. As you would also know, fire is really important for native vegetation in Tasmania. So we would encourage landowners to do low intensity burns, to do fuel reduction burns if that was something that was required. The council's not against people doing fuel reduction. Vegetation clearing, of course, would not be undertaken in a conservation covenant, but if it needed a break for some reason, a fuel break on the outside of that, then that would be negotiated with the landowner, usually by the state government at the time of the conservation covenant going on the title.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Biggins. Are there any further questions from the public? If not, thank you very much for your questions. We now move to questions on notice from the public. We have 4 listed there. The first one is from Professor Rowan in relation to a responsible person conducting a business or undertaking at council, with a response from Mr. Arnold. The second one is from Mr. Biggins in relation to bushfire readiness, with a response from Ms. Lorang and Mr. Basham. The third one is from Ms. Landon and in relation to the Kingborough Interim Planning Scheme, with an officer's response from Ms. Tyler Moore. And the fourth one is also from Mr. Biggins in relation to bushfire readiness, with an officer's response from Ms. Lorang. Just a reminder that for those who are watching at home, that if anybody would like to submit a question on notice that will then appear in the following council meeting's agenda, they can do so by emailing us at kc@kingborough.tas.gov.au. Questions without notice from councillors. Do any councillors have a question without notice? I've got Councillor Cordova and then Councillor Gladwright.
Thank you, Mayor. My first 2 questions are about road safety. The first road safety question regards line markings on Redwood Road in Kingston. It's come to my attention that the line markings on Redwood Road between Redwood Village and the Butterfield Link, Algona Road, have become faded or they're no longer visible, especially on the bends. This may be dangerous as cars tend to take a direct line and sometimes they end up crossing onto the wrong side of the road. Does council have a plan to repaint the line markings on Redwood Road?
Mr. Reeve, I believe, would be able to assist us with that.
Thank you.
Through you, Mayor, council doesn't have a plan to remark those. That's not council responsibility. That's actually a Department of State Growth responsibility. So each year they do come back to council and actually ask for particular candidates, which we put forward. It would be fair to say that we have more candidates than they have the ability to fund. I'm not sure off the top of my head whether that one was one of the ones that was put forward. Generally our list is reasonably long and only part of them get funded, but I'm happy to chase that one up and see.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, the second question about road safety is Auburn Road in Kingston. At Auburn Road, cars are parking on both sides of the street, causing motorists sometimes to cross onto the other side of the road to avoid parked cars. And the issue is, according to the constituent I spoke with, particularly acute near the crest at the southern end of Auburn Road. There are concerns also around the Metro bus passengers egressing safely. Has council considered options to make this road more safe?
Mr. Reeve.
Through you, Mayor, I'll answer it in a couple of ways. So it is a project that's actually sitting in our 5-year plan to completely reconstruct Auburn Road, and it's currently being designed this financial year. But in terms of the immediate safety issue, yes, we are aware of the fact that there's been some more cars that have been parking in Auburn Road, not all the time, but on occasions. So we are in the process of actually having some discussions with some of the residents in that area there, and we will be looking at putting some further controls in to actually try and control those vehicles, particularly where they're getting near to the bend, which is closer to Nina.
Thank you. Just to follow up through you, Mayor, with those further controls, is it too early to say roughly what they might be? Are they traffic calming, or are they potentially parking restrictions, or what might they look like?
Yeah, Through you, Mayor. Yes, it'll be either parking restrictions or potentially it may be some repainting of the line. So there is a white line that's actually in that area in Auburn Road, because it's a relatively narrow road that will effectively preclude people parking in that dangerous area.
Thank you. And through you, Mayor, my final question is actually about play spaces. This one is about a playground for Peggy's Beach, Electrona, I should say near Peggy's Beach. I note that in Appendix 5 of the Kingborough Play Space and Playground Strategy 2020 to 2025, it reads that, quote, Electrona, increased residential development is currently poorly serviced by play opportunities for local family groups, end quote. So my question is, to cater for the growing population in Electrona, has the council ever considered creating a play space in the wedge of land south of Dixon Street near Peggy's Beach?
Thank you. I'll ask Mr Smee to address that. I know we've had some discussions about this in the past. Mr Smee.
Through you, Mayor, we do indeed own land in that area that could potentially be used for playground development. I'd have to say it's not something we've looked at in detail. As you're aware, we've recently done a playground audit that has identified that the majority of our existing playgrounds need upgrading before we look at new ones. The development of the Ashton Dennehy Park was in part predicated on use by Electrona residents, and similarly the replacement of the Snug footbridge so residents from Electrona could get to Ashton Dennehy Park to utilise that playground was a consideration there. So to answer the question, yes, it is a consideration for us, but it would be a longer term rather than short term one.
Thank you, that's all.
Thank you, Councillor Cordova. Next I've got Councillor Gladright.
Thank you. I was receiving some reports that there were some mischievous young people who were swimming out to yachts in Snug and causing a little bit of damage out there. And there was a suggestion that we could put a pontoon down there for them. I was just wondering who looks after those pontoons and how much do they cost, and have we considered one for Blackman's Bay and Snug at all?
We do look after them and they cost us a bit when they run aground. Mr Smee.
Through you, Mayor, I am aware about 10 years ago there was a pontoon proposed at Snug. I'm not aware we've ever proposed one at Blackman's Bay. There are issues in relation to the need to have them in a sheltered spot, because otherwise they are very difficult to anchor, and they also do provide liability issues for council. As to what they cost, Mr Reeve might be able to help me on that.
Mr Reeve.
Through you, Mayor, don't quote me on this figure there, but I think we're talking about something like about 40, no, it's more than that, I think more than $50,000 or so per pontoon, so they're not cheap. It's not like a piece of wood that we stick out in the middle of the bay there. And certainly neither of those actually feature on our short-term plans.
Mm-hmm. Understood. My next question was about the Reconifelt that we use. I note that the soft plastics, the red cycle soft plastics, has recently ceased, which was terrible to hear, but it did make me think about the Reconifelt. Do they collect soft plastics from Tasmanians to make, or where is that made? Is there some way, like, would council be able to collect soft plastics and send it to their Reconifelt factory?
Mr Reeve.
Through you, Mayor. So effectively, where they actually get the additive, which they put into their normal mix there to make Reconifelt, is through a few different sources. But their factory for making it's actually in Sydney.
Right.
And if you like, the additive is very similar to lots of pellets that you might actually see, so that's what it actually looks like. So yes, there has been some issues that have been publicised with the red cycle, but that's not actually impacting in terms of the production of Reconifelt for our roads.
Right, okay. And my last question was about the container deposit scheme. What's Kingborough's involvement in that scheme? Do we have locations identified for one of those deposit places?
Mr. Reeve.
Through you, Mayor, so it's still going through a process at the moment there where they are actually finalising the scheme. So they have actually advertised for people that could run the scheme. I believe they've just extended that out into the new year. So we've had some discussions, at least with one potential provider of those services there, of possible locations. But I guess that won't be finalised until the decision's made on the final network provider. And at that stage there, we'll have some further discussions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions, Councillor Gladwright? I've got Councillor Fox and then Councillor Bain. Councillor Fox.
Thank you, Mayor. I was told over the weekend that plastic bottles that come from milk bottles, plastic milk bottles, are no longer being used in the recycling system because if they're not, people aren't washing them, and if they're not washed, the bacteria become so putrid in them that they contaminate the furniture that's made with the plastic, and the odour is so bad that it doesn't disappear even when they've been melted and made into furniture. And therefore the recycling people are no longer collecting them. I would like to ask Mr. Reeve if that is an urban myth or whether that is reality.
Mr. Reeve, can you be a mythbuster?
Through you, Mayor, I do like my urban myths, but I'm not really sure about that one. That's not come to my attention before, so as far as I know, they were still collecting plastic milk bottles, so I haven't heard of that one, but I'm happy to actually chase that up with our provider for our collector, just to see whether that's the case or not.
They may well be collecting them, but they may not be using them. That's my concern. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fox. Councillor Bain. And then Councillor Midgley.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question about public transport for Spring Farm and Whitewater Park Estates. Several meetings ago, Mayor, I think you spoke about a conversation you had with Minister Ferguson about the lack of public transport servicing these areas. And Minister Ferguson requested Council send through details of how many people reside in these subdivisions. Just wondering if that letter's been sent yet or not.
I can't remember the outcome of this, and we were going to try, it wasn't as simple as finding that information from, it was going to have to be a combination of our rates department and also our planning department. And I don't think I've seen the figures for that yet. So, Mr. Arnold.
Yep, through you, Mayor. No, I concur. I haven't seen the figures for that yet, Councillor Bain, but we'll take it on notice and follow it up.
Okay, can I just add to that, because I've been receiving a lot of emails from residents who have written to State Government about this issue, and within the reply from State Government are saying that these subdivisions are a long way from being built out, completed. So I think it is important that we get the message to them that these are pretty full.
Yep.
And also, can we add that there's no State Government contracted school buses servicing the area, and there's a lot of families there. So.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Midgley.
Thank you, Mayor. First question is in regards to the Huntingfield Park and Ride bicycle locking area. I was informed that it had been locked, and so I checked on 2 occasions and it was locked. So I'm just wondering if we know any details about why it's been locked, and if not, can we please follow up?
Mr. Reeve, I reckon you'll know the answer to this.
Through you, Mayor, I don't know the answer to it, but I'm happy to follow it up.
Thank you.
That was the briefest answer from Mr. Reeve ever, except for imminent.
I normally send a question, but I just remembered that one. The Youth Action Kingborough, I'm wondering if we have any updates in regards to if this group is still occurring and how it's going.
Dr. Fox.
I'll have to take that on notice. I'm sorry, I don't have the information at hand.
Any further questions without notice from councillors? If not, we'll move on. We're still on page 7. We had a number of questions on notice from the previous meeting. The first one on climate action from Councillor Cordova, with a response from Mrs. Loxley, Oh, that was the only one. Beg your pardon. So we're now at petitions still being actioned. There are no petitions currently still being actioned, and at the time the agenda was compiled, there were no petitions that had been received. We come now to page 8, Officers' Reports to Council. We have the Kingborough LGBTIQA+ Action Plan with a recommendation on page 10. I'm looking for a mover and a seconder. I have a mover in Councillor Midgley and a seconder in Councillor Gladeright. Councillor Midgley.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm so glad to move this motion tonight for the LGBTIQA+ Action Plan and Report as being the chair of that working group. And before I start talking in more detail about this, there are a number of people that I'd like to acknowledge. Firstly, Mr. Julian Punch, who's in our audience tonight, if that's okay. Most of us know Julian. He reached out to me a few years ago when I asked if council could fly the pride flag at a council meeting. And that question provided a meeting with Mr. Punch and the understanding of his history in working with local government and the years of work by members of the Kingborough Huon Valley Coming Out Proud program, a long outstanding partnership that commenced in 2005 with Rainbow Communities Tasmania Incorporated, and understanding his continuing advocacy for members of the LGBTIQA+ community across Tasmania. Thank you to all the members of the working group for their time, their comments and guidance, the process, questions, reflections and thoughts on all aspects of the engagement and action plan. It was a great model of a working group that council can learn from when working with many other community members to find out their needs. Thank you to Dr. Katrina Stevenson, previous council director, who was a big catalyst for making this happen at council. I think sometimes as councillors we talk to community members, but then moving things along does take time in regards to the time and process and staffing needs in that area as well. So thank you, Dr. Stevenson, for that. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Gladeright, for your attendance at meetings. And thank you to the staff in community services involved, and mostly Melissa Staples, who really carried the workload to make this happen, which I believe was a very good time frame considering the breadth of engagement and coordination of the working group to a great document that we have before us tonight. 162 people had input into the survey, which was developed by the working group, and it went broadly out to the community via library, events, schools, sporting groups and local community groups, etc. The results from this survey were put together in an engagement report, and highlights from that, I'll try and be brief. Normally I don't need a timer, I should have practiced what Councillor Cordova does. Overwhelmingly, the Kingborough was seen as a friendly, welcoming, progressive and accepting community. The majority of respondents reported that they have not witnessed, harassed or discrimination against other people because of their LGBTIQA+ identity. However, when we looked at the data, there was specifically from people who identified as LGBTIQA+, of respondents stated that they had witnessed harassment or discrimination in Kingborough during the last 2 years. And there's quite a few quotes and anecdotes that I won't read all of them, but I hope that all the councillors have had a look. There's experiences within council, so I think that's really important for us to understand, so we know that how as an organisation we are an inclusive place for people to come and an inclusive place for people to work. So the comment here, the sports centre, sports grounds and council buildings do not feel very LGBTIQA+ inclusive. As for attending a council meeting or raising an issue, I would not feel safe to do so given the behaviour of some of the councillors. So I'd hope that within 2 years' time we do not see such a comment like that. And then there were several clear themes emerged to make Kingborough a safe and more welcoming place for the LGBTIQA+ people to live, work and study. And then some further comments that I thought to highlight was the survey I'm filling in makes me feel safe and welcome. Just gratitude for giving us a voice. Your survey will open many wounds but also provides the bandages, a means to share. Thank you for taking the time to do this work. So I hope that we all read the results of that survey with those thoughts in mind. The findings were distilled into an action report, which again is in our council agenda. And again, this action report came back to the working group. People provided feedback and they distilled the themes that were provided from the engagement. And as you can see, there's 4 broad themes in the action plan of greater understanding. So to understand the experiences and needs of our LGBTIQA+ community members and respond in a way that are inclusive and welcoming. Celebrate and visibility. feeling safe, heard and having a supportive place. I'm not going to read them all because of time. And equal access. And so you'll see in the action plan that there are immediate actions and actions that require greater understanding. And with the actions that require greater understanding, again, members will be involved in having conversations around that, but some of the actions that can be immediate is it can be such a simple thing, but a big thing for some people in regards to flying the rainbow flag, and
Time.
Would you like an extension of time? I'm sure somebody will move that. Moved by Councillor Cordova and seconded by Councillor Fox that Councillor Midgley be given another 3 minutes. All those in favour? Against? Motion is carried unanimously. Councillor Midgley, you have another 3 minutes.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, beg your pardon. Oh, beg your pardon, I didn't hear it, sorry. So it's, we'll have a show of hands then required. The motion is that Councillor Midgley be allowed to speak for a further 3 minutes. All those in favour is Councillors Fox, Cordova, Dean, Bain, Richardson. You have to vote, Councillor Midgley, Glade Wright and Reid, and those against, Councillor Antoli. The motion is carried. Councillor Midgley.
Thank you for your support, councillors. So as you can see, there are immediate actions and then actions requiring further consultation. I don't need to read through all those immediate actions and further consultation actions, but it's great that we have a really, I think it's quite a succinct and actions that can be aimed for. And some of them, even though I can see that in the report it does reference that we will need some budget to allocate to fulfil some of those actions, I can see that some of the actions that are written there actually can be done by staff at no cost. By staff at no cost, and also there's quite a number of grants, for example, that you can apply for. So the Working It Out has community grants that people can apply for, and different councils across Tasmania can probably provide a whole range of different grants that they've applied for as well. The Burnie Council and Sheffield Council are doing some really great work in this space, as is Clarence Council as well, and the City of Hobart. So in the second phase of consultation, the action plan again went out for community consultations. I think they've done a really thorough job, and it was great to see Equality Tasmania through President Rodney Croom commented that the plan is unprecedented. No other council in Tasmania has gone to such trouble to find out what the LGBTIQA+ community wants and to develop a draft action plan in response. We are very supportive of what you have done. Congratulations. So I hope councillors can see the importance of this for Kingborough, and you will support council's commitment to creating a community that is inclusive, safe, welcoming and respectful for all. Local government is the level closest to the people and is a core part of our communities. Local government is uniquely positioned to foster community spaces and values that centre diversity, are safe and are welcoming to all. So that's what I'd like to say on that. I hope to have your support. There's just one question that I had myself, and that was in regards to, in the recommendation, noting that the action plan is to 2025. I'm just wondering at all, do we need to put a B in the recommendation, I guess, to look at a time frame so we can track how the action plan is going, and saying that, that we have quite a number of action plans across a council and in community services particular, and if we are going to be doing more of these for other community groups, how I understand we track it in the annual report with a sort of a tick or a halfway there sort of a thing, but how then will it kind of come back to council? Because I'd really love to understand exactly what has been achieved and what hasn't been achieved, and how can that be reviewed, I guess, by council.
Dr. Fox, could you assist us with that, please?
Sure, thank you for the question. So we could provide some reporting back, either through the quarterly reports that come back to council or the annual report. I'm always loath to set up another reporting structure for plans and strategies, but certainly it will be important to demonstrate our progress on implementing this plan. So I'm more than happy to commit to some reporting 12 months from the sign-off, from the endorsement of the plan, or certainly 12 months from the funding of the plan, which we're still yet to determine. So more than happy to commit to reporting. I think probably the quarterly and the annual reporting is the most appropriate forum, but I'll take advice on that.
Great, thank you very much for that, and I look forward to hearing from other councillors.
Thank you, Councillor Midgley. Next I have Councillor Cordova.
Thank you very much, Mayor. I'll just take this opportunity now to, in light of what we've just heard, move an amendment to add if it pleases the mover and seconder, to add a B to the recommendation that council will review the actions in November 2025, but I'm happy to read the room to see if we want to manipulate that somewhat. But
we don't like manipulating things. That's not a very nice word, but I think what
to amend my amendment.
I think what Councillor Midgley was indicating was a more regular form of reviewing, not just at the end of that period of time, if I took your words correctly.
I guess it was just a question around that it would be reviewed, and that, for example, we can have a look at that and see, because there is a lot to do within a 2-year time frame, and staff, there could be changes or different things happen and whatever. Just to note that doesn't kind of just left by the wayside, that it is an important document, and how do we keep track of that?
Dr. Fox.
I was just going to add that maybe the appropriate way to ensure it is monitored is to put it forward as an action in the next annual plan, and then it will be a regular item that's reported on in those quarterly reports and the annual report at the end of the year. If we say because we haven't yet considered the funding for this, and we won't consider the funding for this until the next financial year, it would be good to have it included if there's funding provided through the budget process from mid-2023 to mid-2024, and to then have a 12-month reporting at the end of that financial year, if there's funding provided through the budget process, reporting on that. So if it's funded through the budget process, it will be included in the annual plan, and then will be reported on quarterly and in the annual report at the end of that financial year. Does that make sense?
Councillor Cordover, does that satisfy you, or did you?
It makes sense. Now, do we need to put that as a form of words as a B item in this motion, or do we just take it as read?
Dr. Fox, have you got a short set of words that could
I would
suffice?
suggest we delay that until we've considered the funding aspect in the budget process.
Yes. Okay, that's fine then.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Do you want to make a contribution?
Yeah, so I guess without relitigating all of... I firstly want to congratulate Councillor Midgley and everybody that was involved in this, particularly the staff as well, and all of those key stakeholders who contributed. The main themes, I think, is the big takeaway here. It's greater understanding, it's celebration and visibility, it's feeling safe, heard, and having a supportive place, and it's equal access. And this council, to hear the words of Rodney Crome, what a ringing endorsement for what we're doing here and how we're trying to make this an inclusive space. I think it really is uplifting and warming to know that our hearts are in the right place and we're trying our best. And the first step to trying your best is to listen. And so I think this has been a good process. It's an iterative process. That's why I was so keen to move an amendment, or at least reflect in the chamber tonight that this isn't a set and forget kind of thing. It's something that you put up and then you work with and you adapt and improve as time goes on. So I think these are great first steps, and I commend the motion, and congratulations to all involved. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Cordover. Do I have any further speakers? If not, I will just make a contribution before anyone else wants to. I just wanted to thank the working group and Councillor Midgley and Councillor Gladright for their work on this issue. I think that the model that has been used of the working group and how quickly it progressed through this year is a refreshing model, and one that I think we could probably adopt to other groups. And indeed we did have a motion at our AGM on the weekend in relation to giving multicultural community in Kingborough a voice, and so this is maybe potentially a form of model that we could use for that as well. But I think that this is a very good report. It was good to see so many people who engaged in the survey. It does trouble me, even though a lot of people said that they had never personally experienced harassment or discrimination or felt unsafe in Kingborough. I think that this figure, which says that of those who did identify as LGBTIQA+, almost 30% of respondents stated that they had felt unsafe in Kingborough sometime in the last 2 years. That makes me incredibly sad to hear that, and we should not have that type of community where somebody, because of their sexual orientation or their background feels unsafe where they live. So I think there are some very powerful messages in here. I note that certainly that people overwhelmingly said that they hadn't experienced any of these feelings at council venues, but I think there is still more work that we can do. And I note that in the presentation that Mr. Smee gave to the AGM on the weekend, that we discussed the fact that we were going to, as we're doing up public toilets, that we're going to move to have some gender neutral ones, and that the universal access ones be for all sexes. And I think that's a small but positive step that we can do. I really like the way that this has been set out so that there are some immediate actions that I think we can do very quickly. One of the things that I found very powerful that we did earlier this year was when we had Working It Out come and do a workshop with councillors and any staff that wanted to come along. I thought that was very interesting and very important, and it made me realise that some of the smallest things that we do, for example, our forms and how prescriptive we are around just, asking, putting everybody in a box and saying they have to be this, this or this, and being a bit more flexible the way that we word things and the information that we seek, and respecting people's privacy, but their rights to have their choice of how they're addressed and so on, are what I would say organisationally small things, but things that we can do effectively that will make a significant difference. So I think there's obviously some resource issues with some of these things, but I think there is, I hate the term, but the low-hanging fruit is there for some actions that we can fulfil, and particularly around our sporting infrastructure, our sports centre here at the Civic Centre, and other community pieces of infrastructure. So thank you very much to all the members of the working group who took part. We put out expressions of interest, and we had a really strong group, and importantly very representative of age groups as well. I think they've produced an excellent body of work. I did want to thank Mel Staples for the work that she's done on this, because I know it's an area that she's very passionate about. And I do hope that this is endorsed by councillors tonight, because I think it is part of us saying as a council that we want to have a safe, caring and inclusive community for everybody who lives in Kingborough. So thank you, Councillor Midgley and Councillor Glade-Wright, for your work. I just turned myself off after that. That is not the end of the debate. I've got Councillor Antoli and then Councillor Dean. Councillor Antoli.
Thank you, Mayor. I have also some questions, if I may, about the report. So, but my contribution is that I believe we do have a safe and inclusive community in Kingborough. It's obvious from the comments from the people that they believe that Kingborough is a safe and inclusive community. In my own personal life, I'm proud to head an organisation that over 10 years ago was the first government-funded shelter in Tasmania to take into its care a trans individual, a person born female who identifies as male, after every other shelter in the state had rejected that person based on safety grounds. We're still in touch with that person. We've been an absolute leader in that respect. We've had multiple trans people in our care, one right now who I'm also assisting with. And it's been an absolute pleasure to help people with that sort of a background, because with my own psychology background, I'm very well aware that we are complicated human beings, and that with various things that happen to us and various traumas, life is tough, and that we need to make sure that people are safe, that they feel included. My concern is, are we looking at a report here that was written with that was looking for a questionnaire to support it? The raft of recommendations are community-wide. There's going to be the placing of the pride flag on top of the building without community consultation, which quite a number of people in the community of a migrant background, of a faith background, might find that very difficult to swallow. Have they been consulted and asked? 102 people responded to this survey who identify as LGBTQIA+. A number of people identified as, the majority identified as male or female, a huge number identified as heterosexual. There's an enormous raft of a regime of sweeping changes that need to be applied to councillors, that will affect staff. Will a staff member who doesn't want to wear an ally badge be vilified or bullied? Will a councillor who doesn't want to wear an ally badge be vilified or bullied? Will a staff member who does not want to go to a working out forum be vilified? I've been to multiple working out forums. I've asked my staff to come to those forums. I found them very helpful. But that's my personal choice. So I have concern that this report is quite sweeping. It affects even gender diverse toilets. I'd like to know, what does that mean? That's my first question. What is a gender diverse toilet?
That was actually the second or third question, so we'll take that one and then we'll go back to the one about the flag policy, because I can give you some information about that. Mr. Smee, do you want to help us about the toilets?
Through you, Mayor. So, whereas we previously have had gender specific, we now aim to have gender neutral, so they are unisex.
So they're individual cubicles?
Yes.
Right, so will we be having toilets where biological men can walk into the women's toilet? Will that form part of this reform?
Through you, Mayor, the toilets are unisex, so there's no longer male or female, they are gender neutral.
So for the toilets that are mixed, where you go into a toilet like we have here in council and there's more than one cubicle, will we be putting up signs to say that you are welcome in this female toilet if you identify as male? I've gotten a lot of questions about that.
Mr. Smee.
Through you, Mayor, where we have existing facilities that are male and female, and we haven't been able to upgrade them to be unisex throughout, they will remain male and female, but as the Mayor previously noted, we will be endeavouring to provide the disability access facility as a gender neutral facility.
Thank you, Mr. Smee. I think the public will appreciate the fact that they will not have put upon them that unsafe situation. I have a question about the flag.
Oh, the flag.
So could you explain what consultation we will do before putting up the pride flag on top of council properties?
So earlier this year, back in March this year, I brought a motion successfully to council to have a fourth flagpole installed in the forecourt. Because the issue that's been plaguing us previously is that when we've had a request from a community organisation such as Legacy, who once a year, during Legacy Week, they have asked us to fly their flag, and that means that we then have to take down an existing flag. So we have now installed a fourth flagpole, which unfortunately got held up, but it's up, literally up now. It doesn't have any flags on at the moment because we're going to be developing a flag policy. The policy did come before council, I think it was when I was away with COVID back in July or August, and it raised some more questions about it, because the idea is that it be available for a number of groups to request to have flags flown during the year for days or weeks of specific nature. It's certainly not unlike other councils that have flag policies, but my understanding, as I said, I wasn't there, but my understanding is the debate sort of opened up a few more questions, and so we've agreed that in the new year we'll be having a workshop in relation to the flag policy before it comes back to council again. So there will be an opportunity for people to make comment on that policy once it hits the agenda.
Thank you for that answer. What will be the status of an employee or a councillor who does not want an ally badge or to attend a working out session?
Mr. Fox or the General Manager, Dr. Fox, either.
Look, the intention of this action plan is to be inclusive. So certainly we would encourage people who are willing and want to attend those forums and to wear the ally badges. But if individuals are not keen to attend for various reasons, that's fine. And if they don't want to wear the badge, that's fine too. We're not trying to exclude anybody. We're really trying to be inclusive.
So I actually had a phone call from a member of staff who's terrified that he is going to be vilified over this because he is of a particular faith where homosexuality is frowned upon. He's scared that he will be out of a job if he does want to stand by his faith and not participate in this. And he says, I'm the most welcoming person in the community. I welcome those as I have been welcomed into this country, in this community. What is this person's employment status based on this reform agenda?
Well, as Dr. Fox has just stated, it's a voluntary voluntary participation in wearing a badge or taking part in the forums, just as it is at other times of the year when we have, it might be, I'm just trying to think, White Ribbon Day, and people choose to wear a white ribbon or they don't. In the past, that during there used to be red ribbons for World AIDS Day that people could wear, and as you do in state parliament and federal parliament, members and staffers make a choice aligned with their beliefs and their conscience to either participate in that and wear that and not. And that's, I guess, freedom of choice. And we certainly are not mandating this for any members of staff or any councillors, but what we want people to do is feel free to wear those badges if they wish to.
Thank you. There is concern that this is a slippery slope where we say that they won't be targeted and they're fearful that they will be, because then there will be a culture of you versus us. So they talk about inclusivity not applying to them.
Yeah. Well, all I can say is that we do have a code of conduct that applies to employees, and if any of our staff at any time feel that they have been vilified, threatened, harassed, bullied, or whatever words you would like to put to it, then certainly they need to have a conversation with our HR manager, and appropriate action will be taken, because we want to have a safe work environment for everyone, whether it's councillors and staff and visitors to the Civic Centre as well.
I suppose, so I put onto the socials, what did people think about this? I'd like to know. I do like to know what people think. You know, I'm an elected official. I want them to know, and I put it out there. And I would say on the socials, it was mixed in terms of what was in public. It was leaning towards positive. I was overwhelmed with the number of private messages, private emails and phone calls of people who are not happy with this. And the overwhelming question was, this reform agenda places upon council property and into the community the needs and the agenda of a really small minority. And when will they get a voice into whether or not they want a pride flag, whether they want the staff to have ally badges, whether they want people going to their state schools offering this raft of services? I've had business people say, I don't have any issues with gay people. Now I have to either submit going into a business index as to whether or not I'm gay or gay not friendly, the entrance point being that I have to go to working out or whatever gender inclusive training for me and my staff. Am I now going to be shunned and shamed that I'm not part of this directory? There's a whole raft of things that this reform agenda actually wants to apply to the community that I don't see it got from the survey. I'm concerned that the actual reform agenda was written well before the survey. The survey went out and a tissue of statistics have been applied to the survey to now apply to the entire Kingborough community. So where is going to be the public consultation over the thousands of ratepayers as opposed to 102 LGBTQI plus people, and we don't even know if they even came from Kingborough, it's anonymous, and if they voted more than once to get to that number.
I think with most surveys, and I'm probably sure it was the case with this one, you can actually only set it up so that they only vote once because it recognises your URL. So unless somebody was
Your IP address, correct.
Yep. So unless somebody was very passionate about this and accessed multiple computers, I think we can probably discount that people have voted like that. I firmly believe that this has been gone into with the best of intentions in terms of forming the working group and then and its terms of reference, and then identifying how best they could go out to the wider community in Kingborough and ask people for their views on things like safety and inclusion and discrimination. And look, I would like to see 5,000 people answer this survey. It would be great if they had. They chose not to. This is actually in terms of surveys that we put out, this is a healthy number of people that have responded. The one thing I've learned during my time here is that unless people have a vehement objection to something, they can be apathetic and not want to engage in taking the time to do a survey because people are busy. So I do feel confident that the wider community, this survey was put out to everyone. It was put out on our social medias, it was put out on our website. We have 9,000 people who follow Kingborough Council on our Facebook page alone. So it went to those 9,000 people. It went out in media releases. It went out to different community groups asking for people. We can't force people to fill in a survey. The opportunity has been provided to the broader community, and we got this number, but I think that's a healthy response rate. People, the response rate for surveys is very, very low, unfortunately.
I do remember seeing the survey come through the socials, and it made it very clear that they wanted to hear the views of the LGBTQIA plus community, of which I and the vast majority of Kingborough are not members of, so we didn't contribute. So that's the problem. And given that we have a survey about the views of the
Sorry, I beg your pardon. Mr. Smee has just indicated that you've used your 5 minutes.
I'll move to extend it.
Okay, I've got a mover that 3 more minutes, that Councillor Antoli be provided 3 more minutes, moved by Councillor Cordova and seconded by Councillor Fox. All those in favour? Against? Okay, I'll take a show of hands, please. All those in favour is Councillor Fox, Cordova, Bain, Richardson. Oh, sorry, let's try that again. Antoli, councillors, sorry, those in favour, let's try that again. Councillors Antoli, Fox, Cordova, Bain, Richardson and Reid. Those against is Councillors Dean, Midgley and Gladerite. So the motion is successful, so you have another 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate that extension, Councillor Cordova. I suppose no other issue has lit up my phones like this one. I don't know why. You put things out on the socials, I suppose people respond. The LCZ issue is close. I don't think probably is more vehement. The number one comment is, this is a raft of changes that you would like to impose upon staff, businesses and the community. Definitely on staff and councillors. Without consultation outside of an incredibly small subset of the community, a subset that I have been actively supporting hand and glove for over 10 years. But I have to respect the vast majority. And so the feedback is, when are we, the rest of the community, going to get a say on this too? Because the actual survey that went out in October was aimed at a very specific community, saying, how can we help you, this subset of community? And I have no problems with that. I have no problems with making them feel more inclusive. I understand the torment that a trans person feels going into a toilet that is opposite to the agenda they identify with. I commend the fact that we're going for unisex toilets, because then you can stop that problem completely and everyone feels safe. But there is a whole range of things in here that just do not include the rest of our community. And when Mr. Kroom says that we are going further than any other council in Tasmania, including the most wokest, which is Hobart, you've got to ask yourself, are we going too far? So my final question is, when was the report drafted? It's too comprehensive for me to feel convinced it was drafted after the survey landed on your tables.
I might ask Councillor Midgley or, I don't know, Dr Fox, you weren't here then, so that's no... Councillor Midgley, would you like to speak to that? Because I didn't have a direct involvement because I wasn't part of the working group.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
When was the report drafted, please? The actual action plan. The committee has been running for some time, what, 6 months or something like that?
Sorry, yes, I can't remember the exact dates because we had an election between those times. So the working group possibly 6 months ago, and then the initial, while the working group developed the survey, that survey went out to the broad community. It was in the library for everybody to take part of. And if people wanted to have some views in regards to what you're expressing, they could have actually done that as well. They didn't. Very small minority did. In regards to then, it came back to the working group. The working group evaluated the responses, distilled the action plan, and then the action plan went out, and I would say that was about approximately 2 months ago. Can I get a nod from staff? Yep, so about 2 months ago. And then we had to wait for the new council for then it to become, and actually, so it was quite a good process, but it has been back and forth to the community centre, sporting clubs, schools, a whole range of people to participate. And as the Mayor has said, this was actually quite a high uptake. We were very, very pleased with the number of people that did have a say in regards to this. And during the, while the survey was out, if we did have any negative comments or fears and such that you're talking about, then people could have actually said something, but they didn't.
Did you include any negative feedback? Because with the survey that we're going to be looking later about the memorial in Kingston Beach, there's a lot of feedback for and against that has been included, so it's helpful. There's nothing like that in here. It's all positive, positive, positive. So I'm trying to understand how you captured any of the opposing views.
Do you want to... Sorry, Councillor Midgley.
From my understanding, all the feedback would have been captured. And I think the War Memorial is a different one because you weren't able to capture that other feedback in the survey. This survey, however, all the feedback was captured, and from my understanding, all of it is in the report, or summarised therefore. But if there was any of that feedback that you're talking about, that would have been captured.
The $20,000, where will that money, is that intended to go, and how did you come up with that figure?
Dr Fox.
Thank you for your comments. I will just add to some previous comments that were made. So we did have 162...
Sorry, Dr Fox, because you're wearing a... Could you just, come close? Yeah,
yep.
Thank you.
So we did have 162 people fill in the survey. Of those 162, 126 live in Kingborough, and a further 20 study, work or recreate in Kingborough. Yep. 5 preferred not to say, and 11 were other. So we do believe that a large number, the vast majority, were from Kingborough. As was mentioned, the individual IP addresses make sure that only one response per person, unless they have multiple IP addresses in some way. In terms of the funding, councillors are being asked tonight to endorse or not endorse the action plan. The funding and the budget submission will come forward in the budget process. We just wanted to give you a ballpark of what that might look like at this stage. We're talking about $10,000 a year for 2 financial years. That funding is intended to be used for the signage at toilets, where we can provide that gender-inclusive signage for the appropriate toilets, for the training that might be offered to staff and to aldermen, and for community groups, for promotional events and celebratory activities, and for flag flying and those sorts of things. So at this stage, it's an indicative cost. That funding submission, that budget bid will go up through the normal process. Councillors will have an opportunity to see that detail and to approve or not approve that bid or elements of that bid. We just wanted to put a number, an indicative number forward with this plan, so you know what that looks like.
Thank you. I've asked a lot of questions. I appreciate Council answering those questions. One of the two most comforting things I've heard is that A, the toilets will not be mixed gender toilets, and that the flag pole will be able to be used by other people apart from just one group.
Yep.
I'll hand over to other councillors now if they have any other questions.
Thank you, Councillor Antoli. Are there any further? Councillor Dean.
Yeah, look, I'm happy to support this. I congratulate staff and Councillor Midgie, who's clearly very passionate about the subject and has worked really, really hard on it. Just bear with me, as we've spent obviously a fair bit of time talking about this already, so I think it's actually worthy of a decent comment. For me, reading the report brought to light many positive stories about the people who feel we are becoming more respectful and inclusive of the LGBTIQA+ community, and that was really nice to hear. But the survey revealed that there's still a way to go, as the Mayor has commented on. I do believe Council has the capacity...
Sorry, Councillor Dean, can you move your microphone a little bit closer, because you're fading out a little bit and I'm worried we're not going to pick you up on the recording. Thank you.
Thank you.
Use your big teacher voice.
Yeah, it's been going all day. Thanks. Look, I do believe Council has the capacity to play its part. Council's provided obviously a lot of services. Perhaps the most visible of these are our public spaces, whether it's community halls, sporting grounds or playgrounds. And so in recent years, there's been a lot of work done to make sure those spaces are made safe and accessible. For example, Kingborough has its own Disability Inclusion and Access Advisory Committee, who has been pushing for improvements in this space for a number of years. So it makes sense that as a council, we develop our public spaces to be also safe for our LGBTIQA+ community. The type of actions suggested in this report, I don't think are going to cost the world. Having an all-gender bathroom, celebrating inclusivity every now and then with the flagpole, or advertising welcoming places as optional, they make sense. And just to say that, look, for my generation, I don't want to speak too broadly, and I think for the one that I teach, I feel we're on board with this. I think that young people generally will be really supportive of Councillor Midgley and the staff work, and will appreciate the progress that we're making here.
Thank you, Councillor Dean. Are there any further comments? Otherwise, I'll ask Councillor Midgley to close the debate.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to people who have contributed tonight. I would like to say that it's not a reform agenda, and it's not something that's going to be imposed on staff. It's important for, as I stated before, and as the Mayor really clearly articulated, that people feel safe and included. It was a thorough consultation. It went out wide to the community. Everybody could have a say. And the results, compared to many other surveys and consultation that we have done in regards to like the youth policy, I'm quite sure actually received a lot more results than this. What the engagement report shows is that we do have much more work to do to ensure that we have an inclusive and safe Kingborough. And following the guidance of the Tasmanian Anti-Discrimination Act as well, I think this report definitely highlights a lot of the statements and sentiments in that act as well that we also need to reflect on when we talk and think about this. And I hope that in 2 years' time, if we were to conduct such a survey again, that we have 100% result that all people in Kingborough feel safe and included from all ages, from our young people to our older people, and especially those who identify as LGBTIQA+ in our community. So I hope to see support for this, and I hope that we see support for this in our upcoming budget deliberations.
Thank you, Councillor Midgley. I'm going to put the motion. It's as printed in the agenda and on the screen that Council endorsed the Kingborough LGBTIQA+ Action Plan 2023-2025. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against? I'll have a show of hands, please. All those in favour? Councillors Fox, Cordova, Dean, Bain, Midgley, Gladwright and Reid. Those against? Councillor Antoli and Councillor Richardson. The motion is carried. We turn now to page 42, Unauthorised Vegetation Damage Signage Policy Review, with a recommendation on page 44. I'm looking for a mover and a seconder, please. A mover in Councillor Gladright, seconder in Councillor Cordova. Councillor Gladright.
Thank you. The purpose of this report is to seek council approval for the revised unauthorised vegetation damage signage policy. I note that there were minor revisions made to the policy. The intent of the policy is to educate the community about the impact of vandalising vegetation on public land. Trees and other vegetation in our reserves, streetscapes and coastal areas are fundamental to the character of our municipality. The signage achieves an educational outcome by indicating to the community where tree vandalism has occurred and that it is a serious criminal offence. I'm not sure if there's much more to say, but it looks like a good policy and I support the endorsement.
Thank you, Councillor Gladright. Councillor Cordova.
Thank you, Mayor. Just at the outset, I'd like to ask for a bit of clarification about the differentiation between Category A signage and Category B, and what are those changes that have taken place? Just to...
Sure. Ms Quinn.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. The changes are fairly minor. We've actually changed the size of the smaller sign. Because they were actually quite close together in size. So the smallest sign now is more like a road speed sign, about that sort of size. The other major changes in terms of the criteria is before they were quite specific and we had trouble actually deciding which sign, size sign that it fitted, where now we've made it really a lot more specific, and we've done that by setting out what the criteria are for a size B sign, and then everything that falls below that is going to be a size A sign. The authorisations remain the same in that a size, one of the smaller signs of A can be authorised by an authorised officer, and size the larger sign B needs to be authorised by the General Manager, so it's the same as the other policy. The other thing we've included it, but in the past, the last policy had more of a single outlook on conservation in terms of the impact of that damage, and we've actually broadened that out to reflect some of those criteria in the significant tree policy to try to then flow those same reasons that the community value vegetation through our vegetation management policies, if you like.
Thank you, that's very helpful. And through you, Mayor, I guess just another question before I start my contribution, which will be brief, is about the evidence or the evidence base around these signs. I assume that they operate in many other jurisdictions. Is there any way really of measuring whether these have an effect on behaviour, or whether they work or whether they don't work? And if they don't work, then it makes perfect sense to make them smaller and smaller and spend less and less money on them. But yeah, I'm just interested in the evidence base around it.
Ms Quinn.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. Yeah, this type of signage is used quite commonly on mainland Australia, and that's where the idea came from originally. But in Tasmania, I think Kingborough was one of the first municipalities to start using the signs, and since then other councils have asked us for our templates and have used them. In terms of if they're successful, the reason, I guess the way we have monitored that through time is to see if the damage continues. So on that site, so what we have found is that when we have put signs up, so at Snug Esplanade and at Conningham, as two examples, at Kettering, the damage to the vegetation in those places stopped. So I guess once people were aware that damage was occurring, unauthorised damage was occurring, it stopped. I don't have evidence or information from the mainland though.
That's okay, thank you. And through you, Mayor, I guess something that has been running through my mind is that potentially when the damage does stop, that may very well be because the person who is the one who wanted the view of the water
has achieved their objective.
They've achieved their objective, and so it's one of those chicken or the egg things. However, ultimately, my feeling is that so much of this is about education and about social cohesion, and this notion that we're living in a community, we're trying to all get along, and that just because there might be some self-interest or self-benefit for one property owner to damage the environment, that they shouldn't do that because of the rest of us, because we're all trying to get along, and that includes biodiversity and flora and fauna as well. And of course, we all well know, as I say often, that we're living through climate breakdown, through an anthropogenic climate emergency and a biodiversity and extinction emergency. So I obviously support the policy and I was proud to second it. It kind of breaks my heart thinking that people do damage our native wildlife and our natural landscapes for so little. They take so much. Now, if this works, and I hope that it does, I hope it continues to work, I think it's good. And also, I think that we should do everything we can to try and mitigate environmental loss and damage, particularly in areas of important sensitivity. Education really is the key, that we actually need people to not do the damage in the first place, and that is through good communication, and that's through, you know, an endless pursuit of I guess, patiently explaining to people why nature is important and why Kingborough is actually so valued by so many people is because it's beautiful and because it's clean and green and because it's got these wonderful natural and cultural assets. So ultimately, I guess I am pleased that we're focusing on, you know, what we can do, what we know that we can achieve, and I think it's an ongoing process. So I thank the author and the authoriser for the work that they're doing, and though it pains me, I think that, you know, we will see these kinds of events on an ongoing basis every now and again, and whatever we can do to mitigate that, we should. So I commend the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cordova. And while that was going on, Councillor Midgley left the room at 6:41 and returned at 6:43, and Councillor Dean left the room at 6:43 and returned at 6:44. Councillor Dean, you've got your light on.
Just a basic question. How often does this kind of thing actually occur in the community? I didn't notice that in the report.
Maybe once a year or so. I'd say about once a year. I know that look, it does vary between mature trees that may be blocking someone's view to somebody poisoned. There were some new trees that were planted last year at Sedgebrook Reserve in Bonnet Hill that the community planted after we had grown them in our council nursery. There were about, I think, 15 of the plants, and somebody took it upon themselves to poison all of them and they all died. And there was no feasible reason why somebody would do that, because the location, it wouldn't block anyone's view. So that one was a mystery, and they've now been replanted and the community association's installed a camera to protect them, but we shouldn't have to be putting cameras up everywhere to protect our trees, which is, you know, ridiculous. Anyway, but thankfully it's, you know, maybe an annual thing, but yeah.
Yeah, look, I'm supportive of the report, of course. It would have been nice, not that it's obviously nice to hear that it's not so regular. Thanks.
Yep. Thank you, Councillor Dean. Are there any further comments? Councillor Glade-Wright, did you want to sum up? No, thank you. So I will put the recommendation, it's as printed on page 44, that Council endorses the revised unauthorised vegetation damage signage policy 5.7 as attached to this report. It was moved by Councillor Glade-Wright and seconded by Councillor Cordova. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried unanimously. We move now to page 52, Tinderbox Beach Erosion Management Community Consultation Report, with a recommendation on page 56, and I'm looking for a mover and a seconder, please. Moved Councillor Fox, seconded Councillor Cordova. Councillor Fox.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess when you look at the report, you might see that I feature in quite a number of the photos, so I do declare an interest.
We won't make you fill out a form for that.
It was wonderful to see so many residents turn up from the area, and also how well the survey was run and organised by Liz Quinn and others from Council, and to speak with our coastal geomorphologist on the spot, Chris Sharples. It was really useful. And the three alternatives that were suggested were heavily debated, we could say, and I'm pleased to see the recommendation is that the engagement that continued after that obviously indicated that there should be a retention of the foreshore, but there should be a slow retreat, and that there should not, in the first instance, be a solid wall, which from the discussions on the site showed that in the long run the beach could be eroded, but it might take a long time. And so the suggestion that we have plantings to protect the foreshore, because it's obviously highly valued by the community, not just by the locals, but also people visiting, people coming there for boating, and also it's a diving area. It's a marine reserve right off that coast. And, I recommend the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fox. Further speakers? Councillor Midgley.
Thank you, Mayor. I also commend that it was a great, another great engagement and consultation by council staff, and a beautiful beach. It's such an asset and jewel in Kingborough, isn't it, Tinderbox Beach? I'm wondering if the community who were involved in the consultation and engagement for this are aware of this report and the outcomes and recommendation for the next process?
Ms Quinn.
Through you, Mayor. After I asked when people filled in the survey and attended the meeting if they'd like to keep updated on the project, and I have been keeping them updated, so I've got an email group. I did let them know that the report was going to council tonight, so they could watch if they wanted to. If the report is supported, then it will go on council's website after tonight, but it's not there at the moment. Because it's in the agenda.
Thank you. That's all the ticks for engagement boxes, isn't it? Getting back to people, because sometimes it misses out in many cases, not council, but other areas. And in regards to just this is subject to budget deliberations as well, how, I guess that comes down to councillors, doesn't it? But how do you see likely that the landscape planning and improved beach access will be considered in the budget? I guess staff will be putting that forward, and it'll be subject to what else is put forward. Is that correct? Getting nods. And also, would there be grants and things like that that possibly could be applied for?
Ms Quinn.
Through you, Mayor. Potentially. I'm not... Usually grants are, that come in this space, although this is more public open space management if it's about a plan for the reserve itself. They normally come in doing work rather than planning, but we'd certainly look out for one. I don't think we're not talking about a major plan for the reserve. It is a small reserve. It's already got a lot of infrastructure in it, so I'm not imagining it's going to be a huge budget bid, but of course there's always lots of competing priorities in the public open space areas. So. Yeah.
Thank you. And just noting that it says erosion at this stage is not, critical, but should be monitored. So I guess how are we monitoring that, and what's the process in place for this?
Ms Quinn.
Through you, Mayor. So we currently monitor a number of sites, including Conningham and Kingston Beach, using a TASMARC methodology, which is a state government developed methodology for surveying. Sometimes community groups do it, and sometimes council does, so we'll use that at Tinderbox Beach because what we really need to know and don't have a definite on at the moment is the rate of retreat. So we know that the beach is eroding, but we don't know at the pace of that erosion, apart from looking at historic photos, which we did as part of this process. So that's where we'll be trying to get some more accurate information on how fast that retreat is going.
Thank you, Ms Quinn. Councillor Cordova.
Thank you, Mayor. I think it's that risk that is identified. It's this notion that, if we set a public expectation at a certain level and then we're not able to meet that due to either budgetary constraints or others. But I just wanted to point out that the survey was designed to understand how people use the reserve, what value that they have on it, and to capture their views in different shoreline erosion management options that were proposed. And over 60% of respondents considered addressing the issue of erosion as very important or important. 34% of survey respondents have witnessed major changes to the beach at Tinderbox. 48% have witnessed minor changes. So what that means is, in total, 82% of the people that know this area the best have noticed these changes to the beaches over time. So I was interested, and this will be a question if I can figure it out, so there are 3 adaptation options that were presented in the consultation. So there was the managed retreat, sand container treatment, or rock rivetment, and the consultation asked people to rank their preferred option. And so it turns out that managed retreat was the highest ranked option. Nearly half of the respondents said that. With the temporary barrier, 31% thought that, and rock armouring, 20% ranked second and third. My question is, whenever we're doing consultations like this, without being a geomorphologist, how do you know that the thing that you're selecting is the right selection? And to what extent do we weight a community opinion? Obviously, if the science and the evidence said, well, the best thing to do is rock revetment, but the majority of the community said, you know what, it's actually better that we just do a managed retreat, and as community infrastructure gets is put at risk, we're happy to just manage that through retreat. Like, how are we as a council supposed to, I guess, balance those two things? Because on the one side, you've got experts who are telling us some things, and then on the other side, we're asking for community consultation. So can we just hear something about that?
Ms. Quinn.
Through you, Mayor, thank you. That is such a good question. Really important to explain it. So the reason, I guess, when we started this process and started, like the report says, started thinking about what to do at Tinderbox Beach and stormwater and car park improvements, the staff at council at the time said, let's build a rock revetment because the beach is retreating. The beach is eroding. And we could have just gone and done that at that point. We have done that at other sites that have required that in Kingborough. I think what we've learnt through time on coastal hazard management at council, we've had a maturing of how we see it, and we've learnt that whatever you do at the beach, of course, has another reaction at that beach. And we've also thought about that, so we can come and fix erosion, if you like, and slow it down by building a rock revetment or putting sand containers there, because we've done it and learnt what happens there. But it changes the way that the beach works. And the beaches, one of the reasons the beaches are loved by the community. And so in thinking about what we do to erosion at the beach, we try to think about what impact will it have on the ecology of the beach, on the geomorphology of the beach, on the beach users and how people use that beach. So we learnt that if we put a rock wall at somewhere like Tinderbox, which would have happened, say similar thing at Cottingham, the beach sand is very shallow and there wouldn't be a beach. So eventually the beach would become drowned with sea level rise. So there'd be less sand, and then eventually as the sea level rose, there would be no beach. And so that's why we ask those questions about what do you value? Because I think it's really important to understand, is it the sand? Is it the playground? Is it the picnic area? Is it the barbecue shelter? What is it? And if it's the sand that the community really love and that's why they go there, then maybe it's important that council considers, how can we keep the sand there the longest? And the other part of answering that question about how do the community know, that's why we engaged the geomorphologist Chris Sharples to come along to the community meeting, and his report is actually online, his technical report on our website, because I think it is really important. It's complicated, and that public meeting, we were there for, it was freezing cold, and we were there for, an hour and a half or something, because people had so many questions for Chris to really try and understand what was happening at their beach and what was likely to happen in the future, and what would happen if we put sand containers, what would happen if we put rocks. And so I think that's a really important part of the consultation, is that engagement, so we can bring the community and the people who love that beach along with us on that journey.
Thank you, Ms. Quinn.
Thank
Councillor
you.
Cordova.
That was a very helpful answer, and I guess it reinforces in my mind the fact that we know that this natural asset and so many like it throughout the municipality are so well loved by the community, and they're such an integral part of what it means to be a resident or a visitor in Kingborough. And so it is about finding out the views of those stakeholders and then helping them understand what's going on, because the changes are inexorable. I mean, they're kind of locked in. My understanding of it is that we can manage around the edges, but ultimately we're going through we're going through a very rapidly changing time, and so it's really important that we engage the community and bring them along with us, but ultimately there will be some difficult decisions that need to be made. So once again, I thank everyone for the work that's gone into this, and I commend the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cordova. Do I have further speakers? Councillor Fox, did you want to sum up?
Thanks for the explanation from Ms. Quinn. It's very helpful, and the good question. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fox. I will put the motion as printed on the screen and in the agenda on page 56. It was moved by Councillor Fox and seconded by Councillor Cordova. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried unanimously. It's just gone 7 o'clock. We have quite a few other motions and such to get through, so I'm going to just suggest that we have a quick, and I mean really quick, like 5 or 6 minute comfort break. Grab a cuppa, use the amenities, and be back here as soon as you can, and hopefully we won't be here too late. Thank you. 7:08 p.m. And we will recommence the meeting. I'll just get the General Manager to confirm that that has restarted the recording.
Confirm, Mayor.
Thank you very much. We are now at page 69 in relation to the Kingston Beach War Memorial with a recommendation on page 71, and I'm looking for a mover and a seconder, please. Moved Councillor Antoli and a seconder, seconded by Councillor Bain. Councillor Antoli.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to thank Daniel Smee for the report. I'm grateful for the succinct way that he got to the point. It's a wonderful community that we are honouring, our return service soldiers, but those not only those who fell in war, but those who served in war. I was lobbied over the weekend by a few members of the RSL as to which particular option they wanted me to go for, and I just simply had to say, look, the majority has spoken, so I will just go with the majority. But I do recommend this to us all. I think it's a time that we actually refresh the War Memorial site there at Kingston Beach. I do believe it's the best site. I understand that there's opinions either way as to where the site should be, but I do believe it's the most evocative site. For those who have been to the Anzac Day ceremony, the dawn service, it is the most amazing location to actually hear about them landing on the beaches of Gallipoli during the moments of silence, and all you can hear is those gentle, beautiful Kingston Beach waves lapping on our beach. You feel like you're having an out-of-body experience and going back to another time. It's wonderfully evocative. It's one of the few, shall we say, ceremonies or events that we force our children to go to get up early every morning, whether they like it or not. They have to go. If mum and dad have to go, they go, and they just love it. And in the end, they love it. They may not like getting up so early, but they do love the event, and we want them to grow up to respect people who have served our nation in such a way. I'm particularly grateful for Mr. Smee's point in 4.5, which is in relation to the above, which is a range of different things that should be commemorated. We will leave it up to the RSL to do that. Thank you, Mr. Smee. It is in honour of them, and it is their, I believe, decision to actually write down or to work out how they should commemorate it. And with the 50th anniversary just around the corner, it's just the right time to do it. So I recommend it to us all to adopt, and on both of the recommendations, and to support a capital allocation of funds to have it set up in time over the next financial year. Thank you.
Turn myself off while I just ate my biscuit. Didn't want to hear you have to put you through my chewing. Thank you, Councillor Antoli. Next I've got Councillor Gladright.
Thank you. I just want to acknowledge that I did have quite a few community members who were concerned about the way the consultation was conducted in relation to this memorial. I have since asked questions about our consultation process, and I feel comfortable now that the consultation wasn't done according to our communication framework, because it was in fact, we were just facilitating the survey on behalf of the RSL. But I was wondering if Mr. Smee could just go through that again for the record to clarify that situation, please.
Mr. Smee.
Through you, Mayor. Yes, so when the RSL first approached us in relation to this project, they asked the question, what are the parameters around obtaining council support for this project? And we met on site with our urban design officer. They presented very conceptually what they were proposing, and we conveyed from an officer perspective that our biggest concern related to the extent to which the memorial would impact on the visual amenity of the foreshore. And certainly that was our primary concern from our urban design officer. But we also conveyed to the RSL that ultimately this was a decision for the community to make. And if the community were supportive of an upgraded memorial on this site, bearing in mind that there is an existing Gallipoli marker there, then ultimately the community would be the ones that indicate support or otherwise. So the RSL did take on board that feedback, and their revised designs do reflect an endeavour to address the issue of the visual impact. In saying that though, the RSL did make the point that they are actually looking for something that is reasonably significant and striking, so there needs to be a balance between what the RSL are endeavouring to achieve through a memorial, balanced against not wanting to dominate the visual landscape of the foreshore. So the RSL asked us what should be the process of determining community feedback. They offered to conduct a survey themselves. We had some concerns with that in relation to the results being seen as biased when the proponent is conducting the survey themselves. So we offered to conduct the survey on their behalf, bearing in mind that, as Councillor Gladerotter said, it is indeed their project. It's Crown land, it's not council land. We do have a licence over it. So that's the process in which we've been through, and the survey was facilitated by council for those reasons.
Councillor Gladerotter.
Thank you. Yeah, just to add on to that, if indeed it had been our project and we were conducting the consultation process, I feel that a sign in situ with a QR code that could capture the people walking by would have also been appropriate to ensure that a whole range of stakeholders were aware of the survey. But like Mr. Smee has said, this wasn't our project, and that's why the consultation was done in this manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gladerotter. Next I've got Councillor Bain and then Councillor Cordova.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a question. Do we know the approximate size of the current Gallipoli marker compared to the two options?
Mr. Smee, do we... It's about that. For the information of the tape, I just mimed the size of it. Mr. Smee.
Look, approximately it's 1 metre by 1 metre.
I reckon it might be a little bit smaller than that, but I think it's smaller.
And just a second question. The RSL mentioned the anniversary next year. Do you know any firm date that they'd like to see this completed by?
Mr. Smee.
Through you, Mayor, given that the RSL have requested a council capital contribution towards the installation, the earliest we could action this is obviously July. So given that time frame, Remembrance Day next year is the target date.
They did indicate in the meetings that that I attended with them that they would have liked to have had it ready for Anzac Day, but unfortunately the time frames just didn't work out, and then of course we had the elections as well. So I believe they're happy with aiming towards Remembrance Day.
Thank you.
Any further speakers? I had Councillor Cordova next, then Councillor Midgley, and then Councillor Fox.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm just going to ask some questions and then move straight to an amendment, and hopefully we can hash it out. And then I'd like to make a contribution if I might. First question is about the issues that were raised in these submissions, and I'm looking at 4.4 now, and there's a list there. What actually happened with that feedback, and to what extent was that incorporated, and to what extent can that be incorporated, given that this is an RSL kind of led project?
Yeah. So all of that has been, or will be, now that once this is endorsed, will be provided to the RSL sub-branch for them to include. I think I've received 2 emails from community members who expressed some concerns about the location of the project and the size of it. And I've encouraged those people to also contact the RSL to convey those. because, as Mr. Smee has just indicated, this is their project. We were merely the facilitator of the process, and I think that the fact that 77% of people support one of those options is quite a sound endorsement of the proposal that the club has put forward. Obviously, it's in their hands now to determine what the one is that they would then like to submit plans for.
Thank you. My second question before I move my amendment is that, so I'm looking at 5.2, the estimated cost around $7,500. Is it possible that we could kind of lock that in as a council contribution, but then still have the capacity to extend the consultation in such a way that everybody feels like they've had their voice heard? So my question is it possible to just lock in the council's support, with that $7,500, but then also open this up for more consultation? That's my question.
Well, it's really up to the councillors to determine if anybody wants to support an amendment to go back to further consultation, but I feel like that this has been quite a thorough response to the survey that was put out, and for a project that isn't ours. And it needs to be indicated that as part of the discussions with the Kingston Beach sub-branch, that other locations were looked at and discounted by them or by council for various reasons. There was, for example, a proposal to perhaps have the memorial located adjacent to the dog beach at Browns River, but that wasn't, there's not enough space there in order to set up how they normally would for particularly the dawn service. And then you also would have the very real problem of people also wanting to walk their dogs at the same time and dogs barking during a solemn service. There was also a suggestion by somebody that it be held at Kingston Park, but that the club were not, the sub-branch were not keen on that idea because they feel that there is an affinity, and as Councillor Antoli said very well, there is something very moving about having the water lapping at the beach when you're having those moments of silence for the dawn service. And I believe it is an appropriate place for this. I would like to add that the club did initially have far more significant plans for what they would like as a memorial at Kingston Beach, and I think that probably would have been more problematic in a range of ways. Firstly, in terms of the amount of space that it would have taken up. I think the initial discussion was they wanted sort of a wall that people would walk alongside and it would have etches in it, and it sounded aesthetically lovely, but it would have taken up a lot more room on that grassed area. And I think they came to realise that our funding commitment was limited and their ability to get grants for construction of something quite major like that was going to be quite challenging. So this seems to be the happy medium that people are endorsing for the sandstone design as being contemporary but also appropriately reflective for what they wish to honour.
Thank you, that's helpful. And final question, before I move my amendment, bit of a Dorothy Dixer. What's the proposed life of this project? Am I right in assuming that it's...
I don't quite understand that question, sorry.
What's the proposed... The monument...
When are we going to do it?
Whatever we choose, this monument, whatever anyone chooses this monument to be, is it not true that it's going to be there really in perpetuity, for another 200 and... I would hope 239
until it falls down
years.
or...
Exactly right. Yeah. So that's why it's so important to get it right, because it's up for 239 or more years. So we should really make sure that everybody's on board. So that's why I'd like to move my amendment. So my amendment is because, as we've heard, there were some people who are not entirely happy with the consultation process so far. So my amendment, which I provided to Ms Morton, is that Council advises the Kingston Beach RSL sub-branch that it does not yet support the proposal for the installation of a new war memorial at Kingston Beach as currently proposed, and will seek feedback from Council's urban planner and further consultation with relevant stakeholders, and then also to keep in B, which is relates to an allocation of funding to be included for consideration in 2023-24 capital works budget to cover the cost of the foundations and installation of the memorial. So we would keep B exactly as it is and then just make those changes to A.
Could I ask a question of clarification just on the wording of that motion? Yep. You say in further consultation with relevant stakeholders.
Yep.
Is that definitely the wording that you want? Because that could be, that to me says, well, the relevant stakeholders here are particularly the RSL, and so that you'd just be going back to ask the RSL.
And the beachgoers, the people who use the beach, right? So,
well, people who use the beach have had the... Anyway, sorry, I'm not going to debate it now. Do we have a seconder? Okay, so I've got an amendment. It's as printed on the screen. Mrs Morton will put it up. It's moved by Councillor Cordova and seconded by Councillor Fox. So I'll just wait for the amendment to come forward, and then I will ask people to speak to... Would you like to speak to the amendment, Councillor Cordova?
Sure.
Could I ask a question?
Well, when it's your turn, we need to let Councillor Cordova speak to the amendment first, and then I'll put you first on the list. So just for the purpose of people who can't see the screen because they're watching at home, the amendment is by replacing A of the current recommendation with that Council advise the Kingston Beach RSL Club sub-branch, Kingston Beach RSL sub-branch that it does not yet support the proposal for the installation of a new war memorial at Kingston Beach as currently proposed, and will seek feedback from Council's urban planner and further consultation with the relevant stakeholders. So that is what we're now going to debate. So Councillor Cordova, over to you.
Thank you, Mayor. I've been approached by, as I'm aware that other councillors have too, by groups and individuals that have concerns with this proposal, specifically the way in which the public engagement was carried out. Many people support the RSL, and this memorial is going to be an important... It's obviously very, very important to a great many people. However, the community engagement survey didn't really provide the opportunities for the community to share their concerns or extrapolate. So the examples that have been used is, for example, the question was, do you support the upgrade to the memorial at Kingston Beach? And if you selected no, the next question was, which option do you prefer, sandstone or obelisk? So this is a kind of Hobson's choice, as it were, or maybe that's a... It's basically saying, do you choose this one or that one? But it's not giving you the capacity to say, well, actually, I would like this or I would like that. And I just want to reiterate the point that the life of this project, whatever goes here, is going to stand for probably 2 centuries or more. And so we really need to make sure that it's not alienating any group of people, because the balance that needs to be struck, and I think Mr. Smee alluded to this, is that we need to strike a balance against this being a beach for all of us for every day, against... So this isn't just a beach for those special commemorative occasions. It's a beach for every day and for everyone. And so it's really important that we bring everyone on side, because this has to be something that the entire community supports. And it wouldn't feel right if we just pushed this through now without getting the proper feedback. My personal opinion is that what's so crucial about whatever memorial goes and wherever it goes is that this is a place of solemn remembrance and quiet reflection. And it should be a heartfelt and sincere plea for peace in our time. We need to do this with sensitivity, and we need to do this with consideration. We shouldn't do it so rapidly that we don't give everyone the opportunity to say what they would like to have and where they would like to have it. Most importantly of all, the fact that there has been people that have come to us saying that they're not entirely happy with this process, the fact that it's such an important moment of commemoration, the fact that it's such an important piece of community infrastructure means that it behoves us all to take those concerns seriously and to not just ignore those people. It wouldn't be right to ignore those people, and this is going to be an important part of our entire community. It's a part of the rich tapestry of our community, and it's important that we get this right. If this will stand for 200 years, we need to make sure that we did the due diligence in the first place. And the fact that there's been people who have come to us with some concerns means we need to hear those concerns and act appropriately. So that's why I'm saying it's so important that, you know, we show our commitment by locking in $7,500 right now. We can do that with the provision B that's already in there, but also to actually give the community a fair go. Some of the suggestions that I heard was to have a mock-up, or so on a busy day at the beach, you could have a mock-up so that people can actually see what's going on and talk to beachgoers about, hey, this is where it's going, this is what it's going to look like, what do you think? To actually have some sense of scale and size and impact on the beach. And that way everybody gets a go at saying what should be on their beach. Right now that hasn't happened, and I think we can really achieve a robust consultation that actually works and actually brings everybody on side. I think it would be a great shame if something was pushed through now that stands for 2 centuries that doesn't make everybody happy. I don't think that would be appropriate, so that's why I think my amendment finds a nice middle ground. Thank you. Thank
you, Councillor Cordova. Further speakers on the amendment? I might just say a few words, then I'll go to Councillor Antoli and then Councillor Midgley. Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon, Councillor Fox. Sorry, you wanted to ask a question. I did foreshadow that. I forgot to write it down. Councillor Fox.
As seconder of the motion too, I would have also liked to have spoken, but I'll do that later. I have a question in that, how does this amendment differ from the fact that council could ask, or if we were to ask for a development application? I noticed that Councillor Gladewright commented about a sign so people could see what was being proposed. That would be achieved by having a development application where people could have a say and be aware in that location the scale of what is being proposed, the actual scale of the event that's being proposed and how frequently the events would be, but also how this particular piece of infrastructure would be there in perpetuity. And I don't think people have possibly the current black square that's sitting there now, they may not have noticed unless they've attended a service or been particularly conscious of memorials. So I guess the question is it possible for council to initiate a development application or to ask the RSL to put in a development application rather than just have the fact that we're looking for feedback without having that formality?
Thank you. It's my understanding, Councillor Fox, that this is will not be necessary to have a development application for this installation, but I'll get Mr. Smee to confirm that.
Through you, Mayor, that is correct. As covered in the statutory requirements section of the report, Council's Planning Department has advised that it's considered minor infrastructure, and under clause 5.210 of the Kingborough Interim Planning Scheme, it is exempt from a requirement for a DA. So we could ask them to put in a DA, and the response will be it's exempt, no permit required.
Councillor Fox, because you did indicate previously you want to speak, did you want to make your contribution on the amendment now before I keep going through the list?
I guess it's a matter of considering feedback that we have had, and that I don't think saying 75% of people support one or the other option doesn't indicate how many people in this report, doesn't say how many people actually replied to this survey. I guess I would like to see more feedback from the community. I'd also like to see that we consider alternative locations more thoroughly as a council, not just accepting the response from the RSL about what they want and what they don't want. In all due respect, I think this is a very significant piece of infrastructure and also a very significant occasion for all members of the community, particularly those who've lost families in war. I think it's a really important concept to have a place that is a civil celebration, but also highly respectful event. And it's important that we get it right and that we take our time to get it right. I'm a bit concerned about the urgency that has been expressed. I went to the Remembrance Day myself and was told that it's very urgent to get this done before Anzac Day, but now we're told it can't be done before Anzac Day. And I think we should take our time and do this properly, and so that's why I support the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fox. Before I go to Councillor Antoli and then Councillor Midgley, I did want to speak on the amendment. I don't support the amendment. I don't believe that we need to go back out for further consultation. We received 218 responses. We were out for consultation between the 5th and the 31st of October. There were also some comments on Facebook that were provided, and they have been forwarded on to the RSL Club as well. Councillor Cordova, it's not correct for you to say that people were forced to make a choice in the survey between which of the ones that they prefer, because 29 people skipped that question. So if they didn't want to provide a response to whether they supported it or not, then they certainly didn't have to, it wasn't a mandatory field for the next one. So look, we're never going to get 100% agreement on issues when we consult. That's just the reality. There will always be a number of people who have a differing view, and that's their right to have that. But I believe the community have spoken overwhelmingly in relation to this. I don't think that what is being proposed is overly intrusive, because we're talking 3 panels in total 2 metres long and 1.5 metres high, so shorter than me, about up to there on me. And compared to potentially a 3.38 metre alternative, which is the obelisk, which is the more traditional style, I believe this is something that will be an appropriate reminder for the community about the travesties of war, those who have served and those who have fallen, and I do feel that we have given the community an opportunity to have their say. The fact that there were, 200 and something people who, look, we might open it again and we might just get the same 200 people. So we can't just keep going back and going back and going back to, I'm not quite sure what it is that we would be seeking in terms of going back and extending the consultation. So I will not be supporting the amendment. And I'll now hand over to Councillor Antoli and then we'll go to Councillor Midgley.
Thank you, Mayor. I think you've said everything that's on my heart. I think you've said everything that would probably be on the majority of the community's heart. I also don't support the amendment. The time is now. Let's give our ex-servicemen and their families and the rest of the community an upgrade that they have requested. 22% said no. Whether or not they had to then choose between something after they said no doesn't change the fact that their no was captured. It says so that 49 respondents said no, and we just have to live with the fact that you win some and you lose some, and the vast majority have said, let's do it. And it's just obvious from having gone there year after year, the community wants it on the beach. The voices of those that don't want it on the beach are few and far between, so we just need to move on.
Thank you, Councillor Antoli. Councillor Midgley.
Thank you, Mayor. Firstly, I'd just like to say that I, like all of us around the table, I value the work of the RSL and honour those who have served our country, and my own father was in the services for 30 years. It's a tricky one in regards to engagement and kind of falls out of the box of the precedent and excellent engagement that Kingborough Council does, and it's not on council land, but it's probably the most visited beach by Kingborough residents in our municipality. If it was a council consultation, would we have been on site or had a QR code that would have shown the scale and impact of the proposed memorial?
It's just me. I guess in answer to the second part, I don't know, because it's not a mandatory part of our communications and engagement policy. It is certainly a very good suggestion, and we did use it at Tinderbox, but it's not mandatory. But Mr. Smee, you might like to elaborate.
Through you, Mayor, we would be taking advice from our communications and engagement advisor in relation to the most appropriate process to go through in relation to the matter. Whether we have the staff resources to provide an on-site presence, is open to question. I'm not sure if it was our project, that would be something that we consider, but it would be subject to resourcing.
Councillor Midgley.
So council has an urban designer, am I correct on that? Yep.
Yes.
So I see in the report that they have been involved at some points of the project, but what were their expert urban design sort of thoughts in regards to this?
Mr. Smee.
Through you, Mayor, as I indicated earlier, the primary reservation that's been held by our urban design officers is in relation to the visual impact on the foreshore and the potential for a memorial to be visually dominant, and that's been his primary concern in relation to it, and certainly due to that there was a really rigorous process of looking at alternate sites and discussing alternate sites with the RSL, but it did come back to the issue that's been already articulated tonight, and that is the desire to have services with the backdrop and the symbolism of the waves on the beach behind. And I think that once that was understood, it does really limit the available sites along that foreshore. So in the end, we came back to where the original proposal was, and certainly the views of our urban design officer in relation to the visual bulk of the memorial were conveyed to the RSL, and as the Mayor's mentioned, they were taken into account in relation to the revised design that they came up with.
Thank you. And will the proposed design, does it meet DDA compliance, and what's the process for that?
Well, we don't have detailed design plans at the moment, but so that will need to be a matter for when the plans come to council.
Thank you. Mayor and councillors around the table, it is a very sensitive topic, but I do support the amendment, and noting that the RSL, it was suggested, I guess, that perhaps there be some sort of on-site engagement or a QR code or something there, which we as a council would probably do if we were looking at doing something like this in the community. As Councillor Fox and Councillor Cordova, it says, it will be there something for many years to come. So I feel like there's just a bit of a gap missing, and yes, we might come to the same result, but I do think that it would have been a much more thorough community engagement if we could have had something on site that the local people could have engaged with, who access the beach all the time. There's probably that many members of the RSL club, so it's a very easy club to send out emails and that sort of a thing, and get the comments and things like that, but for other people might not have known that it happened. So I will support the amendment because I think it is important that the consultation engagement process is revisited, and what a great time to do it over the busy summer period when there'll be a lot of people actually going to the beach, and we can hear from a lot of different voices around the community.
Thank you, Councillor Midgley. Any further speakers on the amendment? Councillor Gladwright.
Thank you. Look, I don't support this amendment. I feel that we've already, or the surveyor's already spoken to over 200 respondents, and yes, there was 49 respondents who said no. They were also asked that if they wanted to make a submission that they should forward it on to the RSL. So what I'm hoping that out of this process the RSL are going to take on board that feedback that they have received, and I would hope that we have learnt from this, and that moving forward that we can make sure that our communication framework is adhered to. I just want to point out, I did look up the communication and engagement framework, and at 3.2 it's all about who are we informing and who are we engaging with. It says it's important to identify who council needs to engage with and learn from. One tool to assist in this process is a stakeholder analysis to map and classify stakeholders, individuals and groups and organisations that are important to a project. And so what I'm seeing has happened here is that the RSL have put out a survey, but actually the important stakeholders that should have been asked about this proposal were the beachgoers, and those beachgoers may not have been aware that the survey was out without something in situ for them to realise. So I don't support this amendment because I feel that we've already done it now, and those people who weren't happy with it had an opportunity to send feedback to the RSL, and let's hope that the RSL take that on board. However, I think that we should be learning from this situation, and that next time that we make sure that there is a QR code in situ, just like in the previous motion, there was a QR code that directly linked to the survey down at Tinderbox Beach, and I think that that has worked really well, and so let's hope that we can learn from this moving forward.
Thank you, Councillor Gladwright. Next I have Councillor Bain.
Just have a question around 3.2 where it says, 3.1, where it says that a planning permit may be required. Is there any risk that the design could change significantly and still go ahead without coming back through council?
Mr. Smee.
Through you, Mayor, for clarification, it's saying a building permit may be required. It's exempt from planning, but may require a building permit. So they're different things. So planning relates to how it complies with the scheme, building relates to how it's constructed and its compliance with the Building Code of Australia.
So, sorry, the same question around that. Will we see another design, or is it just going to go ahead and could it be modified?
We will need to see plans, but the plans won't come back to the council table. They will come to council staff.
Okay.
Councillor. Okay, is that all, Councillor Bain? Yep. Councillor Dean.
I guess just to follow up that we are actually, as part of the motion, supporting the installation of a new war memorial at Kingborough Beach with the sandstone panel design being the preferred option. So I think that's kind of making it quite clear that we're not going to, they can't just come and revert back to their previous design, perhaps.
Correct.
It would potentially need to come back for us. And look, I'm not going to support the amendment, but I do appreciate that it's a tricky case and that council, and appreciate that we were a facilitator in the communication here. Probably wasn't ideal, obviously, as Councillor Cordova has highlighted there. But there was an opportunity for the community to express their opposition, which was obviously in the minority. And even if we didn't get at the same result on this, I think I do respect that the RSL leads the way on this, and they are the representative community organisation. And so even if we came to something alternative, I don't think it would be palatable to them, as was noted in the report. So we'd probably just be, I'm not sure if it'd be a very effective use of our, or efficient use of our time or resources.
Thank you, Councillor Dean. I think everybody has spoken who'd like to. Councillor Cordova, would you like to sum up on the amendment?
Thank you, Mayor. The RSL is indeed the representative organisation to represent on behalf of returned service people. However, the beach belongs to everyone and the whole community, not just the representatives of that particular organisation. So we have all said how important it is to have solemn reflection and quiet contemplation to commemorate these events on those special days of the year for which it is appropriate to be commemorating. Now, for the rest of the year, we have thousands upon thousands of Kingborough residents and visitors alike who go to this beach, and it belongs to all of us. So we need to make sure that all of the people who have an opinion about this actually are heard, including this councillor who's speaking right now. It's important that we hear what people are trying to say, which is that it isn't fair. What does it say to those people who have written to me and written to other councillors who have expressed their concerns? What does it say to them when we just push this thing through tonight? What does it say? Are they being heard? Are we being respectful to them? And are we listening, actively listening to their issues? Or are we just on our phones? I think it's really important, Mayor, that we respect those people who shared their concerns with this council and with the councillors. This memorial is important and it will be up for hundreds of years. And we know that there are people in our community who have reservations and concerns about the design and the location and many other elements. And by passing this tonight, when I've provided the option for us to have some reasonable and fair consultation, By passing this tonight against their wishes, it is creating, I think, needless animosity, alienation and exclusion. Remember that we are trying to make sure that everybody feels heard and everybody feels included. Now, we know that there's a cohort of our community who use that beach who have expressed concerns to us about this proposal, and instead we are now in the hands of the RSL. As we've heard from Councillor Dean, sure, it wasn't ideal, that's the words that we just heard, sure, it wasn't ideal, but we're just going to push it through anyway. We're now in the hands of the RSL to hopefully listen and incorporate the feedback. Well, what guarantees do we have that the RSL is going to listen and incorporate the feedback? I think it would be so much easier for this council to make a really substantial commitment now, a financial commitment to say that we support this, this notion, but to actually open up to our urban designer and our urban planner and actually open it up to the community so that everybody feels that they had their say. Because at the moment, as far as I can tell, there was about 3 weeks to respond to this, 3 weeks, and yet there's tens of thousands of people that visit our beach throughout the year, and I just don't feel that we gave them, I don't feel like we gave them enough of a say. This is something that's going to last for hundreds of years. It's important that everybody who wants the opportunity to have their say gets to share that. We know some people are against it, and therefore we need to be respectful and we need to hear them out. So I commend the amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Cordova. So I'm going to put the amendment now. It's as printed on the screen. It was moved by Councillor Cordova, seconded by Councillor Fox. All those in favour of the amendment, please say aye. Against the amendment? Okay, I'm going to have a show of hands. So in favour of the amendment is Councillors Fox, Cordova, Midgley. Against the amendment is Councillors Antoli, Dean, Bain, Richardson, Gladewright and Reid. The amendment is lost. So we return to the substantive motion. So Councillor Antoli is the only person at the moment who has spoken on the substantive motion. And Councillor Gladewright has as well. Yes. So Councillor Cordova.
Thank you, Mayor. Just 2 questions there before I make a contribution. At 4.4, the issues raised in this submission can be summarised as follows. Dot point 1 says, and I quote, "The memorial should include reference to the struggle of original Tasmanians to protect their land from invasion." Dot point 2 says, "The memorial should include recognition of those who lost their lives, both traditional owners and settlers, in the Tasmanian War." End quote. What, if any, was the engagement either by the RSL or by this council with First Nations people? Were any First Nations people consulted, or CTAC, or any First Nations organisations or representations, were any received from First Nations people regarding this proposal?
Mr Smee.
Through you, Mayor, I can't speak on behalf of the RSL and whether they have talked to any of those groups. Certainly council hasn't specifically sought to engage with those groups only through the survey that would have been broadly publicised, and they may have responded individually, but as I said, I can't speak on behalf of the RSL as to whether they have engaged.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. These inclusions under 4.4 must have come from somewhere, so obviously one of the 200 respondents or some of them must have raised that. My question is really, would council be supportive of those 2 dot points under 4.4?
It's not up to council to prescribe to the RSL Club what plaques or what acknowledgement go on their own war memorial. That's not in our role in this has been about the size and location of the sandstone or the obelisk, and what the Kingston Beach RSL sub-branch decides to put on there is a matter for them.
Thank you. And would council be disappointed if it were the case that people expressed those 2 issues raised in those 2 dot points and they were ignored? Like, if on the memorial it doesn't say anything about the Tasmanian Wars or anything about First Nations people?
I can't answer that on behalf. I'm one councillor sitting around this table of 10, so I can't answer that on behalf of everybody else here.
Is it true that it is up to the RSL what goes on? So it does mention in the report about the plaques that currently exist that are proposed to go on the back of the Sandstone Memorial. But in terms of what goes on the front, who gets the ultimate say in that?
That is up to the Kingston Beach sub-branch of the RSL.
And so the beach itself is owned by Crown.
Crown land, yep.
So the beach itself is Crown land, but there's obviously a very significant community interest, right, from all of the Kingborough residents in that beach, because I believe it's our most frequented beach in the municipality, if not probably one of the most frequented beaches, I think, maybe in the state. That's true, isn't it?
I don't know.
So
I've never done a study on beach numbers.
No, that's fair enough. And I'm trying to, I think, figure out in my head, putting aside that amendment that got lost, I'm just trying to reconcile how it's going to feel if we're really in the hands of the RSL to make sure that their engagement process is inclusive and respectful. And I really am very concerned, particularly with those first 2 dot points under 4.4, that if there's been no effort to reach out to First Nations people whatsoever, and we're completely at the, I guess, the RSL gets to choose what goes on that thing. So this could be a really contentious and divisive moment in Kingborough's history, and it's not worth pushing that through so quickly in such a divisive manner when we already know that there are tensions brewing here. I think that this whole thing is kind of tumbling out of control. It's going in the wrong direction. I don't feel comfortable with it. I know already for a fact that there are other people in the community who don't feel comfortable with it. And I think on something like this, which should receive, when it's right and has been appropriately consulted, it should receive a consensus, a sense of unity. And there is no such unity in this room tonight, nor is there such unity in the community. I know that for a fact based on the emails that I've had. So at this stage, I can't support this motion. I'm really, I wish that we could do this in a much more robust way to make sure that everybody is brought on side. It's not appropriate to push these things through when not everybody has had their voices heard. I don't think we need to be engendering this animosity over something that's so important and sensitive. I think there's way better ways of dealing with it. And if it is true that the only reason it has to be right now is because of the 50th anniversary, I think Councillor Fox alluded to it, that there were other anniversaries mentioned. I think we're doing this the wrong way. I'm really concerned about how it's being conducted, and I think because it is a public place, it is a beach of utmost importance to the community, we actually need to have more people involved than just the RSL, and that's my firm conviction. Thank you.
Point of order, Mayor. Once understanding orders, once a councillor has lost an amendment, they cannot re-argue the amendment. They can give contribution and ask questions, but they can't re-argue the amendment and bully the council to somehow change their vote. It's passed.
That's a point of order. Actually, on that point of order about mischaracterisation, I'm not bullying anybody.
Thank
you.
You.
Can't say that councillors are bullying other councillors.
The bully pulpit concept.
Thank you. Thank you for the point of order. Councillor Cordova, just bear in mind when you've put an amendment up and then you're making the substantive, not to reflect on the decision that has been made just previously on an amendment. Beg your pardon. Now, we still have a number of people who haven't spoken on the substantive motion. Who else would like to make a contribution on the substantive motion? Councillor Midgley.
Thank you, Mayor. I think Councillor Cordova raised important points in regards to the 4.4, including the struggle of regional Tasmanians to protect their land from invasion. I think this motion will get through tonight, and I hope that council staff can perhaps suggest that CTAC are somehow involved, or other local Aboriginal groups are involved in regards to what actually is on the memorial. It would be great so that all voices can be heard and recognised. And I agree with the sentiments of what Councillor Cordova has spoken about.
Thank you, Councillor Midgley. Anybody else would want to speak on the substantive motion? If not, I'll ask Councillor Antoli to sum up.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, councillors, for your robust contribution. It's now time to, I suppose, bring a conclusion to the discussion so we can move on with the rest of the agenda. The community has spoken. The ayes have won in the community. The noes, unfortunately, have lost. I know what it's like to lose a no, and you just have to move on. With regards to the concerns about all the other points before 4.5, in particular, acknowledgements of Aboriginal loss of life, etc. There are places for that to happen. There are memorials where that can happen. This is the RSL's memorial. It always has been the RSL's memorial. It was never any councillor's memorial. We are simply supporting the RSL to upgrade their memorial site in a manner that makes them feel honoured. It is up to them to add whatever notations to that they wish. And if council feels that other communities to whom this memorial does not have anything to do with need acknowledgement, they can put their own separate proposal on different land. So let's vote in favour of this to honour the RSL members and the rest of the community who believe that this is an almost sacred site in their own right here in Kingborough. People flock from all around the community. People come here from Huonville. I know that for a fact. I meet them every single Anzac Day. They could go to their own memorial right there in Huonville. They love the whole beach effect. So let's please support this, and thank you to Mr. Daniel Smee for the report and for the robust debate.
Thank you, Councillor Antoli. I'm going to put the motion now. It's moved by Councillor Antoli, seconded by Councillor Bain, as printed on the screen and in the agenda paper. All those in favour say yes. Against? A show of hands is required. All those in favour, please raise your hands. Is Councillors Antoli, Dean, Bain, Richardson, Gladwright and Reid, and those against is Councillors Fox, Cordova and Midgley. The motion is carried. We turn now to page 77, Local Government Association General Meeting motions with a recommendation on page 78.
I'd like to move to discuss, please.
Thank you. I have a motion moved to discuss. It's moved by Councillor Gladwright, seconded by Councillor Midgley. All those in favour? Against? Motion is carried unanimously. Councillor Gladwright.
Thank you, Mayor. I understand you have some advice that you can provide us on the following motions, which hence why I moved to discuss.
So just for ease of the recommendation, because you'll note that at the moment the recommendation is that we just decide how to treat each of these, I thought it would be appropriate if we went through each of them and I indicate my initial thoughts on how we should vote on the matters, and then so we'll do them one by one, and then we will then put those into a motion that we can then vote on. So in relation to the Legat General Management Committee casual vacancy, that is really just a very just an administrative one to ensure that the Northwest appointment can be extended, so I have no hesitation in supporting that. Does anybody wish to disagree with that? No? Okay. The second one, Workplace Health and Safety Review of Elected Representatives. This is the culmination of a significant amount of work where the consultant Edge Legal had prepared a report based on significant surveys, individual interviews and a large body of work in relation to I guess the culture around local government. I think the report is excellent. It makes some very, very good recommendations, and I would hope that we could support it so that Legat can then put it to the Minister for Local Government for review. Do I have any contributions on that? Councillor Cordova.
Thank you, Mayor. Just to raise my concern with it. So we'll see how other councillors feel, and I do take all your points, and I hope you take mine in the spirit that they're intended. I've cast my eye over this with the lens of, is this good for democracy and the democratic integrity, or is it bad for democratic integrity? And what I mean by that is that there are many aspects of these proposals that, for example, seek to broaden the application upon which a director can make a recommendation, including a breach. There's also amending the Local Government Act to permit removal of an elected representative from office by a minister. There's also the potential to ban persons from future attendance at council meetings. You know, which persons? Do they include elected? I don't know. 2.6, strengthen sanctions for serious breaches so that there will no longer be a requirement for 3 suspensions before removal from office is considered. I raise these points, and there are a few others within here. For example, 2.1, it says, confirm regulatory intent of the model code of conduct is to promote and protect psychosocial safety, which is obviously really, really important. That we all deserve, no matter where you are in this country or any other, we all deserve to go to work in a safe workplace, obviously. But we're elected officials and we're operating within a democratic environment, which means I'm always very concerned at a fundamental level that when you have unelected technocrats getting to decide whether or not somebody gets to stay or gets to go, ultimately the arbiter of who should be an elected official is the people who get to vote. It isn't somebody sitting in the Legat office or in the minister's department. So I'm always concerned, just in a general sense, about the encroachment on democratic values, where we say because of some hard cases where there have been councillors elsewhere who have behaved in an objectively really problematic way. Now, in those circumstances, it is indeed the code of conduct, and in some circumstances the police, and ultimately what I'm saying is the democratic mandate. So I just think it's really important, and I hope that people can see where I'm coming from, which is that there are some really important aspects of this workplace health and safety, and they go to that fundamental principle that no councillors deserve a serve. No matter where you work, you deserve to work in a safe workplace. But we have to balance that against democratic integrity and the risk to democracy that ultimately in 20 or 50 years, somebody will be in a position of power where they're able to kick out an elected official without the auspice of the population that voted them in. And I'm concerned about that. It might sound highfalutin and a long way in the distant future, but if you look at what's happening in the United States, there's many examples where there's really concerns around the integrity of democracy. And when you create greater powers for unelected officials, and when you diminish the authority that's given to the people when they cast that ballot, and you diminish it by saying, well, now we can kick people out even without 3 serious breaches, or now we can kick people out just on the determination of somebody in the minister's office. These are where my concerns lie. So at that level, that's why I don't support this personally. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cordova. If I can just comment on your contribution, I think that we need to bear in mind these are recommendations only at this stage that will go to the state government. The state government will then go through a process to see which ones they support, what legislative changes they would like to require. There will then be an opportunity at a later date to provide feedback on any proposed changes via legislation. I think we're all very well aware of a case in the Northwest which probably is the origin of the suggestion to remove an elected representative, because I think there was widespread concern from community members and other councillors right across Tasmania that somebody who can be convicted of a criminal offence of the nature that occurred cannot be removed from office at present by the Minister for Local Government. And I think that's an appalling situation, and one that then resulted in a very awkward situation where this person's fellow councillors had to continue to work with them after that incident. So I think there's, I think there would have to be checks and balances around the power that the Minister is given, but I believe that is a particularly important part of this. Now I've got Councillor Antoli and then Councillor Fox.
Thank you, Mayor. It is a fallacy to say that you cannot be removed from elected office. Unless it goes to a vote, you can in both levels of the federal and state constitution. There are certain breaches that will disqualify you from elected office, and it would appear that all we are doing in the local government space is catching up.
Thank you. Councillor Fox.
I find it most sinister on page 83 that there is a requirement that they want to introduce a qualification similar to company director's course as a mandatory precondition for seeking election, an ongoing requirement for continuing professional development. I can understand that, to be maintained throughout the term of the elected representative. As well as having requiring mandatory appropriate behavioural standards. But the fact that they are asking that anybody even seeking pre-election should have a company director's course qualification, I think that is incredibly dangerous. Councillors are meant to represent a cross-section of the community, not just the educated, not those people who are highly qualified. It's important that the mums and dads, that the people who pay the rates, not everybody who pays rates has got a degree. or a higher education qualification. And I think that is really flying in the face of democracy.
Thank you, Councillor Fox. Are there any further discussion on this item? Otherwise, I'll recommend that we vote yes to accepting this report.
Sorry, Mayor, just
Yes.
if I might, just a couple of questions, particularly around 2.13 and 2.14. So this is, I just don't really understand. Change the prescribed period in section 28ZL1 to be over the life of an elected representative's tenure, not just limited consecutive terms. Is somebody able to talk me through what that change actually is in practice?
I haven't cross-referenced that with the Local Government Act, so I couldn't help you with that one. I don't know if anybody else has. Unfortunately not.
And then the second one is about the automatic removal of an elected representative without requiring ministerial discretion in the same section after 3 suspensions. Has this been checked with any kind of, obviously went through each legal, but my question is, has like the Law Reform Council of Tasmania, like have some of these groups cast their eye over these with that democracy lens at all, or not yet?
No, this is just a report from the consultants that were engaged to do this work on behalf of Legat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll be voting against it.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to put that the recommendation, oh no, we're not doing that yet, sorry. But the recommendation is that yes, so we'll vote on these later. Timing of council meetings. I found this one, I have to say, a little bit curious. It was put up by Burnie City Council. They're suggesting that Legat have adopt a policy position about council meeting and workshop times. Legat, acknowledges that there are some considerations, but believes it would be counterproductive to prescribe the times at which councils meet. I tend to agree. I would suggest that we vote no for this one, unless anybody would like to.
Could I just backtrack? I must have missed a beat, but have we decided to vote yes for the workplace health and safety?
So at the moment, I'm just going through and putting the case and allowing a discussion on each one, and then we will put them as a whole. Because we're in discussion at the moment. We're not. There's no
Two
motion.
of them have been marked as yes.
No, that's so that you can follow along, and that becomes the recommendation. Yep. Okay. Any further discussion on that one? If not, we'll put that as a no. Councillor Dean.
Just to clarify, I'm not 100% convinced that we are, or that motion is seeking Legat to kind of prescribe times. It's kind of, for me, quite vague in terms of just actually having a position around making sure that councils are considerate of the fact that there are young people or elderly people or working people that want to seek office, and that there's some kind of policy position around that as an issue, and obviously trying to incentivise a broader kind of cross-section of the community actually running for council. Could you maybe point to where it says there that, or maybe just give me a bit more of a background, because obviously I'm not Legat in tune, where it says that that would actually be making Legat say, oh look, Burnie should have this, and...
Well, no, I don't think that's what Legat is saying. I think what they said, I was looking at the third paragraph. It would be counterproductive to prescribe the times at which council meetings and workshops should be held, because that would cause more problems than it solves. I got the impression that they were wanting Legat to, because the motion is not worded brilliantly, but I got the impression that they were wanting Legat to sort of say, well, you've got to have your meetings between 5 p.m. and 9 p.m. or, on particular days or something like that. I mean, I'm happy to suggest that I listen to the debate and listen to Burnie's argument on the floor, and then we go with delegates' discretion. And if it's...
I mean, I'd probably lean towards that, just in that the intent, I think, of the motion is actually very good. I just wonder whether maybe Legat could be completely wrong, that they might have jumped the gun a little bit on that. But
I'm open to suggestions if you want to do delegates' discretion, which means I listen to the debate and make a determination then, or whether we vote yes or no for this. I mean, I guess I was probably looking at it through our lens, and that is that we have what I think are very workable meeting times that we changed back in 2011 that would allow people to not have to start very late and be home even later, particularly our staff as well as elected representatives. So I guess I feel like we've got it right and are as inclusive as we can be to balance everything. But look, I'm in your hands, Councillor Antoli.
I do think it's hard. I do think it's not worded very clearly, but I do believe it's trying to say there must be councils that are very prescriptive and aren't taking into account the needs of their councillors. I don't know if Burnie is one of these. I certainly don't feel that's the case here. So maybe they're trying to correct a local error. I'm not too sure, but you wouldn't want to be correcting the entire network of councils based on a local issue. So maybe directed discretion or delegate discretion, I should say, is more appropriate.
Anybody got any problem with that? Councillor Cordova.
Just for interest, Burnie's council meetings are at 7 p.m, so that might explain some stuff if they're starting at 7 p.m.
And there are some that start at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, which would be difficult for working.
We did once in 1988. They started at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and that's probably why there were no women on council.
Okay, so we landed back at delegates' discretion. If I can get some clarification and if it sounds reasonable, then to support it. Okay, all right, so DD. Affordable housing we'll be supporting because that is our motion. Then Review of Property Agents and Land Transactions Act 2016. Having read through that one, I think that is worthy of support because that suggests that the onus should be on the vendor of a property to get and supply a Section 337 certificate at the time of the property going on the market. And I think that's quite well argued within the body of that motion, so I'd be suggesting that we support that one. Any arguments against that? Councillor Antoli.
I would like clarification as to what a 337 certificate is.
So a 337 certificate indicates whether there are any any matters that relating to building, planning and plumbing that are outstanding for that property.
Full disclosure, in other words.
Yeah, so
thank you.
And it's
I can definitely support that.
Yeah, it's quite common elsewhere that be a mandatory thing.
Absolutely.
Councillor Richardson.
Is that certificate not something that's picked up in the conveyancing process?
It is, but the argument that's being put forward here is that by that stage someone is committed to buy the house, and if they find that there is an outstanding issue with a non-complying building or something like that, that they get caught up in a lot of legalities then because they've committed to buy the house.
Okay, so the sale of the house is not subject to?
No. Yeah. So it's really buyer beware. And in fact, there have been, I'm aware of cases where conveyancers have not even applied for a Section 337 certificate, and then people have bought a property and years down the track have then been caught. Yeah.
So could an example be where a vendor wants to act as his or her own agent, and therefore a potential buyer might be caught out?
No, it's generally it wouldn't matter if it was a real estate agent or someone else, but at the moment there's no requirement. So I could sign up to buy Councillor Bain's house. He might have done something non-compliant. Sorry for picking on you, Councillor Bain.
Dodgy Bain, yes.
Dodgy shed in the backyard that didn't have a DA, didn't have building permit, hasn't been plumbed properly.
Yeah, that's right. Sounds right. Right. Yeah.
And then my conveyancer may not have got a Section 337. I may not know. I move in. I go to sell the place 10 years later and find out I can't.
Yeah, definitely support it.
Yeah, I'd want a refund. Okay, so that I suggest then that we go yes for that one. So if there's no further discussion, I would like to put that now becomes the recommendation. So the recommendation is, as printed on the screen, that I'm going to put them as a whole because I think otherwise poor Mrs. Morton is going to be, it's going to make it difficult. So I would like
Sorry, if I might, maybe I'm not understanding the process correctly, but to my mind there was only one issue of contention. All of them were basically unanimous except that second one. So may I please ask that we do the second one separately, workplace health and safety? Can we have a vote on whether or not the delegate should say yes or no to that second one, please?
Okay, all right. Yep. Okay, so I'm looking then for, so the first motion will be then include the General Management Committee vacancy, timing of council meetings, affordable housing and review of Property Agents and Land Transactions Act. So it will be those four. I'm looking for a mover and a seconder for that motion. Moved Councillor Gladwright, seconded Councillor Bain. All those in favour? Against? Motion is carried unanimously. The second recommendation then is that we vote in accordance with the indicated there yes for the Workplace Health and Safety Review. I'm looking for a mover and a seconder for that, please. Moved Councillor Antoli, seconded Councillor Gladwright. All those in favour? Against? Thank you. I will ask for a show of hands, please. All those in favour is Councillor Antoli, Dean, Bain, Richardson, Gladwright and Reid. And those against is Councillors Fox, Cordova and Midgley. So the motion is carried and I will be voting according to the recommendation, that is yes. Thank you very much. It's a slightly cumbersome process, but once upon a time many years ago, mayors didn't ask councillors how they wanted to vote and just went off and voted however they felt like it on the day. So it wasn't very democratic. I think this is a much more robust. Okay, we now move to page 89, notices of motion. Councillor Dean has submitted a notice of motion headed Communication of Local Provision Schedule, LPS, specifically the Landscape Conservation Zone, and an officer's response from Ms Tyler Moore. So I'm looking for a mover and a seconder. A mover in Councillor Dean, looking for a seconder, Councillor Antoli. Councillor Dean.
Yeah, look, I've put this notice of motion up really in order to give us an opportunity as a council to respond to the concern in the community in the recent months about the Landscape Conservation Zone. That's part of the new Tasmanian planning scheme. It was clear for anyone who ran in office that it's been a bit of an issue in the community of late, especially during that campaign and the months before that over in the Huon Valley. But I do want to start by saying this is, for me, not a discussion about whether we are for or against LCZ being rolled out. But what it's about is ensuring that we as a council are practising good governance and being responsive to our residents and their concerns. So at present, all councils are being moved over to the new statewide planning scheme, and just over half of the councils have already done this, which means we're in the fortunate position to learn from those who have adopted the new scheme, as well as some who haven't. And what's clear is that the process has been clearly challenging for councils, and obviously a very lengthy one. And this is largely because of the complex nature of what's being proposed. I know I've spent considerable amount of time trying to get my head around these changes, and I feel like I've only just scratched the surface in a way. But I think this in itself is quite an important point to consider, because I'm sure that I'm not going to be alone in trying to encounter that difficulty, and that those in the community will feel the same when they do find out, if they haven't already. So this is why it's important to get on the front foot, I think, and give the community as much time as we possibly can to get them to be able to understand this process of what's currently underway, as well as understanding what the new LCZ zone or LCZ might mean for them. So I'm keeping it brief, given what's already been happening tonight. So I hope councillors will agree with me that we need to be responsive, but I actually really look forward to hearing from all of you and the discussion that ensues. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dean. Councillor Gladwright.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Dean. Yes, I agree with you. There's a lot of apparent concern in the community relating to this particular zoning. I have had quite a few discussions with the planning staff about the letter, and you can see in the officer's response there are some problems that are raised in sending a letter. I note that if we send a letter just to the properties that are proposed for one zoning, then there's a chance that people in other locations will be concerned that they haven't, why didn't they get a letter, and there might be some confusion. So after having a chat today with some of the other councillors and the Mayor and our planning staff, we have come up with another suggestion. So I've got the amendment that has been sent to Ms Morton, and she'll pop it up. The amendment is suggesting that rather than sending a letter, that we host a drop-in forum, and this will be an opportunity for residents in that proposed zoning to come in and have a conversation with staff, ask questions, get some handouts. I think this is a really good idea. I think that the principles of good governance dictate that we are responsive, and given that there is so much apparent concern in the community.
Yep. Sorry, I have to get a seconder for the amendment. Oh,
Sorry.
sorry, no. Were you going to ask the... Sorry, you got a seconder for the amendment, and Councillor Midgley. Next question is before you speak to the amendment, is the amendment acceptable to the mover and seconder?
I was sort of explaining what the
Yeah, I know,
amendment
but
was.
you can't. Yeah,
Right.
sorry.
Okay.
It has to be self-explanatory.
Okay.
Because if it's acceptable, then it's a shorter process, and we're
Right.
at 8:25. So, but that's up to the mover and seconder. Councillor Dean is the mover.
Yeah, look, I'm definitely not one to let my personal view get in the way of a good outcome for the community. Just to clarify, I suppose, could we just have on the record that obviously my motion does name up communication, specifically being mailing of property owners. Just to clarify that such an amendment is acceptable in terms of the changing the intent of it. Sorry.
Sorry.
To get to that
So
part.
is it yes or no? I wasn't quite sure. Sorry.
It's a yes on the
Yes.
proviso that it's an acceptable amendment. And just
It is an
base that.
acceptable amendment.
Okay.
Yep. Yep. Councillor Antoli, are you happy with the amendment?
So I need to understand if it is a substantive change to the motion, because if it is, and if it substantively changes the motion, it can't be accepted under standing orders. So are you saying that we are... When you set a motion, you can't make an amendment that substantively changes the amendment. It's not allowed to be permitted.
Yep. No, the General Manager.
I've just had the LGAT training a week ago.
The other amendment didn't have...
And I need to understand,
much wording change.
while Gary Arnold is looking, if the amendment is saying we're not going to do the mailing, we'll do the town hall meeting, or is it saying let's do the town hall meeting and down the line do the mailing?
So the amendment, just while they're resolving that, just to be clear, the amendment is at this stage, this is about having a drop-in forum in early 2023 as a more effective means of communicating to people directly, because that enables an exchange and dialogue similar to the way people have been phoning in. So that's what it's suggesting, and then there would be letters later on.
In that case, I can support the amendment because you're actually increasing consultation, not decreasing, and under this situation...
Yeah. I know. Yeah, I know, but this makes more sense. Okay, General Manager.
Oh, sorry.
Yep. Through you, Mayor, just to respond to Councillor Antoli's question, it certainly can be accommodated, the amendment as put by Councillor Glade Wright, in accordance with the meeting procedure regulations.
Thank you. Yes, I realise that now because she's not actually changing and wiping out the amendment, the motion, and replacing it with something else, and that's what I needed clarity on. She's actually adding to it and actually increasing consultation. So based on that clarification, I can definitely support it because that's what the community wants, an increase in consultation.
Thank you. So we're both happy, the mover and seconder. Thank you. Councillor Dean with a question.
Just as part of this discussion as we go into, I suppose, do we have the capacity, I suppose, to kind of tweak the amendment, I suppose, in a way that would be potentially more palatable, because there's some, it says early 2023, and I think it'd be great if we could be a little bit more specific about that. And then in terms of the actual drop-in session, is this the opportunity for us to basically say what we think is the appropriate drop-in session, or does that come later?
Yeah, so, okay. going to stop you there because we have to hear from councillor now that we've determined that it's acceptable. Beg your pardon. It now becomes part of the substantive motion. So we're back talking on the substantive motion, of which you have already spoken on it. However, you can ask questions. So I'll give you the first call now to ask questions because this is now the substantive motion.
Forgive my ignorance, I thought we were then going to have the opportunity to discuss that amendment.
Well, the amendment has become the substantive motion because yourself and Councillor Antoli, as the mover and seconder, accepted it. But that doesn't mean that you can't phrase anything as a question to get clarification or to make any suggestions that somebody else then might take up to move as an amendment.
So I guess my question is to the amendment, what does early 2023 look like and what do the drop-in sessions look like and potentially the discussion for the rest of us or when we put in?
So in the discussion that we had today with council staff, we talked about having setting it up so that it might be, and look, the final version of it, obviously, that's something that we would have to look at. Because I think you'd want to offer a range of times to accommodate people who are working and can't get there during business hours. So you might have 2 half-day sessions where you run 9 till 1, and then on another day you might run 4 till 7 or something like that. We have a number of planning staff available. People come in, they have one-on-one sessions with the planners that are there. And then we can provide them with some resources if they need it, tell them where to get more information, and that this is just this is just for the people who are potentially impacted by the landscape conservation zone, because if we were to open that up to everyone, then that's incredibly resource intensive. So this would seem to be the most efficient way to do it, and I would be hoping that we can do it in I'd like to say January, but we come back to work on the 3rd of January. We need to give people enough time, so it's probably more likely February, when schools are back, would be an appropriate time to undertake it. That gives us enough time to ensure we have the staff available, that we have a facility that suits everyone. I would say the community hub is probably the most appropriate venue for it because it's one of our own. It's fairly central. So that was our initial sort of thought bubble, if you like.
Am I allowed to speak now?
Yes.
You sure?
Yes. Councillor Dean, you can ask any questions at any other time without closing the debate. So if you have another question, I can come back to just phrase it as a question. Councillor Gladright.
Thank you. Yeah, look, I think the point that we all probably are feeling is that, yes, there is a lot of concern in the community related to this specific zoning, and the principles of good governance is that we are responsive to that. And Councillor Dean has suggested that a letter would be a good way of responding. I think that having talked that through, there are some problems with sending a letter, and my understanding is that when Mr Stander receives phone calls, people often ring him with concerns relating to LCZ. He's able to have a conversation with them and they go, oh, that doesn't sound too bad, and they go away feeling much better. So a letter doesn't necessarily provide that type of conversation. It can be quite dry, it can be quite boring, and often a letter might just make someone go, what's this all about? I'll ring someone anyway. So it's just generating a lot more work for the staff. So by providing a drop-in forum where people can come in, have a conversation, get that sort of one-to-one communication is, I feel, a much better way of providing that information to the community. I just wanted to ask about the availability of our communications advisor, because she was just shaking her head around the suggestion of February. Is that something we need to consider?
Or we'll
we'll
definitely
work something
work it
out.
based on the availability of staff.
Okay, so the other great thing about the drop-in session is that this could happen sooner rather than later. If we were going to send a letter, we would have to wait for the Tasmanian Planning Commission to finalise their assessment, because otherwise a letter would say, "Dear resident, you're proposed for this zoning. Oh, but we have agreed that we're going to relook at the mapping, so it could change. Oh, and after that, the Tasmanian Planning Commission are going to make their assessment, and it could change again." So really a letter couldn't have gone out practically until the TPC have made their assessment, and that might be another 6 months away. So in responding to the community currently, I feel like a drop-in session is going to provide some more comfort to them in the more immediate future. Mind you, we do have to sort of work out when that will be. So I hope that makes sense, and I'm really keen to hear what other councillors have to say, and I'm really open to coming up with the best outcome for our community.
Thank you. Before I go to Councillor Richardson, I'll just, and then Councillor Antoli, I'll just make my contribution just to clarify what this would look like. This is increasing the consultation or the information available to residents about the LCZ. And as Councillor Gladwright indicated, I think this is to be able to sit in front of somebody and have a dialogue about your own circumstance or ask general questions would be far more valuable and a better use of time. This is only the start of the consultation. I would like to see, because we are expecting the TPC to come back to us around June with their response, and we had also discussed the possibility of putting some information, an information brochure in with the rates notice that goes out in sort of July, that would then go to everybody who receives a rate notice, because if you put anything in rates notices other times of the year, people who pay up front, they only get the one notice, and so we don't reach everyone. So the most cost-effective way to do it is to put information in the one that goes out the first notice of the year once the rates have been set by council. So that would then alert them to the fact that, this is what's going on, and here's where you can go and get some more information about it, or you can call us. Then we would be entering the 60-day public consultation period that is prescribed by the state government for this process. So, and that will also involve some of these community meetings in different locations. So that's just a bit of a snapshot of, how I can see this going, that there are various stages to it, but I think that at this stage it's really prudent to have these sessions to allow people to hear from our planners on a one-on-one basis, and also then for the planners to hear from them before we go back to the TPC. Councillor Richardson and then Councillor Antoli.
Thank you. I would just like to say, I guess, if we are going to go down the path and the effort of having a drop-in consultation, which sounds on the face of it a good idea, I think we need to incorporate into that a very thorough and comprehensive plan to communicate to the community when those will be, because it would be a shame if we go to the effort of putting these on and only 50 people turn up, and then we could turn around in a couple of months' time and people go, I had no idea it was on. So, not a question but a statement.
Yep. No, and look, certainly I agree, and we already just in our meeting this afternoon talked about how we would advertise this to our community, and certainly councillors would play a role in that as well in getting this message out. We know there's already a Facebook page for a group that is concerned with this issue, and certainly they will play a big role in helping us to get this message out. Our own Facebook page has 9,000 people that follow it, so we'll be using social and mainstream media to promote this. Councillor Antoli.
Thank you, Mayor. And I do commend Councillor Dean for bringing this up. If you didn't know that the LCZ was one of my issues, you haven't been paying attention the past few months. And I'm very comforted that I don't have to put the motion forward, and it's testimony to the community that people like myself have been speaking to other councillors, they have been listening, and it's comforting to know that I don't have to always be banging the drum on this. It's actually a good sign to the community that someone else has first the motion and I've seconded. And I wanted it to be that way so that the community can see it's not just one lonely voice, because when it is, they feel that they have lost the war, and they're not. I do believe they are winning the consultation battle on this. That's why I'm happy to support the substantive change. But I have a question about those that are saying, why are you holding off mailing to us? It's probably important for them to know why we need to hold that off. As I understand it, Adrian Stand is working quite judiciously with the TPC, and I would like to put in a bracket, the community are very actually positive about Adrian's consultation with them, so I'd like that noted, and I'd like his manager to thank him for the very proactive consultative manner that he's showing to them, in which he's actually saying, I hear your concerns, you're right. Before I came, I don't think we handled it as best we could. Now that I'm here, I'm going to help fix it. So they're hearing that. But I understand that he's working quite judiciously behind the scenes with the TPC to look at the numbers affected under the previous overlays, and I believe that that it will be actually changed. Those numbers will change. Therefore, maybe holding off writing is a better reason. Can you confirm or deny that rumour?
Yeah, I think that's probably best. I don't know of his interactions at the moment with the TPC, but the General Manager.
Through you, Mayor, Councillor Antoli, I can confirm that the numbers will change. The process is one that post the lodgement of the draft with the TPC, there have already been 2 post-lodgement meetings with council officers. There is a 3rd one scheduled this month, and when the TPC finally give the sign-off to this council to go on public exhibition, I can assure you that if we were to, for example, do a mail out today to say, pick a number, 2,000 properties, that number would not be the same when we get the final sign-off by the TPC. And that would cause confusion big time.
Thank you. And through you, Mayor, Mr. Arnold, would one assume that there is downward pressure on those numbers?
General Manager.
Through you, Mayor, certainly that is part of the discussions that officers are putting to the TPC, and it goes back to the core of the issue in some respects, in that the landscape conservation zone, which by the way I think personally is a misnomer. I much preferred the current environmental living zone, which puts the emphasis on both in living and environment. But that said, the landscape conservation zone was one of a suite of the new zones provided by the state government for us to choose from. It was not a council choice at the time.
Yes, I acknowledge that. I acknowledge that we were handed a dog's breakfast. And the reason why we all know that the LCZ is the contentious one, because it's the only one that has potentially punitive effect on the landowner. And around the valuation of their property and what they can do on their property. So that was the only other question from me. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Antoli. Councillor Midgley.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll keep it brief. Just thank you, Councillor Dean, for advocating on behalf of the community and putting this motion forward. And Councillor Gladewright for articulating in regards to the letter and why that wasn't such a great idea, understanding the response and things from councillors, from staff, but you know, for Councillor Dean, we put things forward, we have the discussion, and that's what being on council is about. I just wondering, I've heard a bit of a where it says where's the amended motion? It's sort of like a drop-in session, and then I've heard people say sessions. So is it just a drop-in session? And again, noting that you could choose the Tuesday of that week and people are away and whatever. It's definitely just one drop-in session.
So I indicated earlier we hadn't quite determined that, but I suggested that we might split it into 2 sessions over an at different times and on different days to try and capture more people, but we'll have to obviously work on the availability of staff and so on. But the option then is always open for people to contact Mr. Stander and have a conversation with him if they're unable to get to those.
Great, thank you. And just also again to acknowledge council staff, they have been working over and above on this matter.
Thank you, Councillor Midgley. Councillor Fox.
I have a question about Councillor Antoni's comment that the LCZ is punitive. I think a lot of people are hearing that word and that is raising a lot of angst. And I'd like to know at this point, why is it seen as punitive? Is it a negative thing?
I can't really answer that question on behalf of Councillor Antoli, and I can't ask him to speak again because he's already spoken, so you might have to ask him.
Well, I think the public needs to know, because I know there are a lot of people watching at the moment and listening, and I think that word is sending alarm bells, and we'll get a lot more upset people coming to our meetings. Perhaps the concern is that they won't be able to build on their land, but in fact, under the environmental zone that we have now, the environmental living zone, that is already the case. So they also need to look after their environmental values. They're not allowed to remove their trees already. There's no change in the actual...
Yeah, I'm struggling to...
I'm asking a question.
I know, and you've asked...
And I would have thought maybe Mr. Arnold was able to help.
Okay, well, I'm struggling because you've asked a question as to why Councillor Antoli is using the language that he is to make an assessment of the LCZ, and that's not a question that myself or any of the staff can answer. That's only something that Councillor Antoli can answer. But unfortunately, he has already spoken on the motion, and so he can only ask a question, which is not helpful.
Well, I guess the general question is, this wording is being used extensively on social media, I understand, and emails that I've received as well. Okay. And nobody's actually explained it to me, why it's so punitive.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Fox. I don't know how to... once again, I can't answer that on behalf of Councillor Antoli.
Would you like me to ask a question?
At 8:45, I don't know.
It's a quick one.
Okay, all right, ask a question.
Councillor Fox, would you like to chat to me afterwards and I'll explain to you what I meant?
Thank you, Councillor Antoli. Okay, is there anybody who hasn't spoken?
I have a question.
Yep, but have you spoken on the substantive motion? A question? Okay, Councillor Cordova, and then I'm going to Councillor Bain, who's been patient.
Thank you. My question is it the opinion of the council that the LCZ is punitive, or is it the opinion of the council that that's an inappropriate way to discuss the LCZ?
Well, we have not made a decision and taken a formal council position to that effect. It's a bit like the answer to the question earlier about I'm one view and there are 9 others around the table. So I think that's the easiest way I can answer that. Councillor Bain, who's been sitting there very patiently.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And just quickly, because a lot of councillors have already said what I was going to say. And that
don't you hate that when you last?
No, as long as the message is out there, that's all that matters. I think this is a really good solution because whereas a letter is a bit of a one-way conversation, this can be put out there for the people who are interested to have, the information tailored to their needs, which I think is a great starting point. As Councillor Richardson said, I think the key is getting the advertising out there so that everyone's aware, that needs to be aware that it's on, whether that be through not just social media but traditional media, because a lot of this is on social media at the moment, so we need to get the message out to the people who aren't aware. And given it's going to be the first quarter of next year, it's going to be early in the piece before the formal consultation, so once this has been done we can assess again, and if more needs to be done then we can do it. Yep. So I think this is a really good way forward.
Thank you, Councillor Bain. I think that's everybody having spoken, so I'm going to ask Councillor Dean if you would like to sum up.
Yeah, look, it sounds like this might get up based on the comments from people around the room, from councillors, so that's really pleasing, and I just want to thank everyone for coming with an open mind, and like Councillor Midgley mentioned, this is absolutely a good example of when people have come ready to discuss, present new ideas, and then come up with ultimately, hopefully, a better outcome for the community. And to touch on Councillor Bain's comments about this is a good commitment for early, whether it's Jan or February next year, we can reassess and see what needs to be done, given that we've got quite a bit of time between then and the next thing. So I think this is a starting point, and the reality is this is probably more that would have happened otherwise if we weren't here today agreeing on this. So I think that's a really good outcome in the community. So I thank everyone for putting their thoughts in and improving it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dean. I'm now going to put the motion. It was moved by Councillor Dean, seconded by Councillor Antoli. All those in favour? Against? The motion is carried unanimously. We now move to page 91, confirmation of items to be dealt with in closed session. I'm looking for a mover and a seconder that we move into closed session, that in accordance with Regulation 15 of the Local Government Meeting Procedures Regulations 2015, Council by absolute majority move into closed session to consider the following items: confirmation of minutes, applications for leave of absence and acquisition of right-of-way for a shared pathway connection. I have a mover in Councillor Gladwright, a seconder in Councillor Fox. All those in favour? Against? Motion is carried unanimously. In accordance with the Kingborough Council Meetings Audio Recording Guidelines Policy, recording of the open session of the meeting will now cease. So open session of Council adjourned at 8:50 p.m.